Hello guys. Welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see the what if Naruto was the reincarnation of Sukuna and became king of curses. Check the summary in the description. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's dive into the story. Naruto's first memories were the whispers and the sharp looks villagers gave him whenever he walked down the street. They muttered rumors that he carried the 9 tails, that he was a ticking bomb. But Naruto, small and alone, sensed something else inside him, something far more menacing than any fox demon. The day he stole the forbidden scroll, the day he tried to prove himself by learning a single technique that might make people acknowledge him, that was the day he felt a terrible presence fully stir. It wasn't just the raw chakra of the 9 tails. It was a sensation that seemed ancient, older than Konoha itself, and older than any living shinobi. It thrummed in his blood like a second heartbeat. At times, when he got angry, a faint voice whispered words he couldn't quite decipher, but it promised violence and unrestrained power. He thought he was imagining it, some remnant of the demon fox's ferocity, but it felt different, alien, and far too intelligent. One night, while he tried to practice the shadow clone jutsu he'd just stolen from the scroll, a rush of energy shot through his veins. He lost control for a moment. The ground under his feet cracked, a swirl of red and black aura flickered around his body, and for an instant, a disembodied laughter echoed in his mind. Then it faded, leaving him stunned and gasping. He staggered home with the technique half-mastered and the sense that something was clawing at the edges of his psyche. He kept that feeling locked inside when Iruka found him. Iruka came with stern anger in his voice, yet a deeper concern in his eyes. Naruto tried to explain why he'd done it. He wanted recognition, to prove he wasn't just a failure. His throat felt tight, and that strange laughter hovered in his mind again. He wrestled it down. When he beat Mizuki that night and saved Iruka, it felt exhilarating to unleash that swirling power he'd sensed earlier. For the first time, he didn't feel hopeless or overshadowed. He felt unstoppable. But the moment ended quickly, the lethal energy receded, and he stared down at Mizuki, who was shaking on the ground and completely incapable of moving. Naruto realized Mizuki's injuries were more severe than he'd intended. If Iruka hadn't stopped him, he might have crushed Mizuki's windpipe. A flicker of fear mixed with triumph lit Iruka's eyes, but Naruto hardly cared. What he discovered was that people could be subdued by more than just fancy ninjutsu. They were also susceptible to raw intimidation, that primal sense of something monstrous peering out from behind Naruto's usually mischievous grin. When he entered the academy the next morning to finalize his status as a newly graduated genin, whispers had spread that he had unleashed unnerving power while stopping Mizuki. Some called it a stroke of luck, others assumed the fox within him had awoken, but no one knew the truth. They didn't know he was as ignorant as they were. He still didn't fully understand the presence that coiled inside him. But he liked the fear he saw in a few classmates who used to laugh at him. He liked that they were now hesitant to meet his gaze. He tried to shrug it off, telling himself he was still Naruto Uzumaki, the soon-to-be greatest shinobi who would stand above the Hokage one day. But when he repeated those words, the other presence mocked him in silent amusement. Team assignments came soon after, and Naruto found himself in the same group as Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. Naruto glanced at Sasuke, who was the class prodigy, moody and brilliant and weighed down by a tragic past. Sasuke gave him the same old haughty glare, though Naruto noticed a slight shift, as if Sasuke sensed a peculiar change in Naruto's aura. Sakura was initially more focused on Sasuke than Naruto, but there were moments when she caught Naruto's eye and quickly glanced away, unsettled by something in his stare. During their first real meeting with Kakashi, Naruto barely concealed his impatience. Kakashi explained they would do a bell test to gauge their teamwork, and Naruto had to bite down a mocking laugh. He was itching to unleash his newfound power and see if this famed copy ninja could keep up. When the bell test began, Sakura and Sasuke tried the usual tactics, distractions, illusions, attempts to corner Kakashi. Naruto, on the other hand, was consumed by an impulse to overwhelm. He rushed Kakashi without so much as a plan, half chuckling at the idea of scaring him into submission. Kakashi vanished in a swirl of leaves and reappeared behind Naruto, pressing a kunai to Naruto's back, only to find that Naruto had replaced himself with a shadow clone so quickly that Kakashi couldn't even track the hand signs. Kakashi's single visible eye widened, impressed at the speed. Naruto emerged from the foliage, swirling red-tinged chakra around his fists for a fleeting second. He almost let that deeper power slip out, but a part of him warned it was too early. Still, the look on Kakashi's face was priceless. Before Kakashi could adapt, Naruto formed a half-dozen clones, each moving with uncanny coordination. Together, they nearly pinned Kakashi. Sasuke darted in, capitalizing on Naruto's shocking assault, but the synergy between them was purely coincidental. It ended with Kakashi slipping through their formation, though not without a trace of visible sweat on his brow. Eventually, their teacher bested them, but he gave Naruto a lingering stare that lacked the usual comedic scolding. Instead, it held a quiet wariness. When they settled down and heard Kakashi declare they had passed, Naruto noticed how Sakura seemed to be eyeing him. Not with affection like she did for Sasuke, but with a mixture of confusion and intrigue. She had never seen Naruto so cunning, so relentless. Her internal conflicts were almost readable. She told herself Naruto was still the annoying goof who'd always pestered her, but she couldn't forget how he nearly forced Kakashi's hand in that short exchange. As Team 7 started their routine missions, mostly dull tasks like catching stray cats or grocery shopping for villagers, Naruto's frustration grew. He was powerful. He felt it in his blood every time a minor annoyance sparked that sinister aura. He wanted to fight, to prove himself. There was a moment, after one mind-numbing mission, when he stood on the deserted training field at sunset, panting from the exercise he'd forced upon himself. He extended one palm, focusing, urging that unfamiliar presence to manifest. He pictured the laughter echoing in his mind, the faint image of a two-faced giant who seemed carved from nightmares. He saw outlines of vicious curses swirling around. They were illusions or memories, or some sort of spectral technique that flickered in the air. The ground around him trembled, and he smirked. For a second, an intense pattern lit up across the side of his torso, black lines that pulsed with lethal energy. He clenched his fist, feeling unstoppable. Then, just as quickly, the energy subsided. He could still only sustain it for short bursts. But he knew in his gut that, once mastered, that power could catapult him beyond any shinobi in the village. One day, he was ambushed by 3 older genin who claimed they wanted to teach the demon brat a lesson. Naruto recognized them. They used to pick on him when he was younger. They cornered him near a silent alley behind the academy. He could sense their fear under all the bravado. Without speaking, he let that malicious air fill the space. One of them rushed forward with a kunai. Naruto sidestepped, slapped the kunai out of the attacker's hand, and landed a brutal strike to the face, breaking the boy's nose. A knot behind, but Naruto spun, hooking an elbow into the attacker's chest, hearing the sharp gasp as the boy crumpled. The last one stood frozen, trembling. Naruto approached, his eyes gleaming with a strangely amused malice. He grabbed the trembling boy by the collar, his voice low. "Are you so eager to die?" he asked, shocking himself with how cold he sounded, how much satisfaction rippled through him at the prospect. The boy pleaded for mercy, stammering an apology. For a split second, Naruto saw an image overlaying the boy's terror. A kneeling figure from a distant memory, old-fashioned clothes, eyes wide in despair, as if Naruto had seen it centuries ago. His head pounded. A voice told him to rip the life from this prey. Then a vestige of his old self, the childish optimism, held him back. He flung the boy aside, turning away before the savage urges took over. But the grin lingered on his face, and in that moment he realized how easy it was to feed on fear. Things grew complicated when Hiruzen, the 3rd Hokage, quietly requested a meeting with Naruto one morning. Naruto walked into the Hokage's office, expecting another lecture or some form of paternal scolding, but what he got was far more measured. Hiruzen studied Naruto's eyes for a long moment, then said in a grave tone, "Naruto, there is something different about you. Even considering the 9 tails, your aura feels ancient." Naruto feigned ignorance. He shrugged, pretended he was just the same old knucklehead. But Hiruzen pressed. "Don't underestimate the watchful eyes of this village. If something within you threatens the balance, you must tell me. Or it might be too late for all of us." Naruto withheld the mocking laugh pushing at his throat. Instead, He bowed slightly, a gesture that was half respectful, half sarcastic, and left without giving Hiruzen any real answers. That same day, Danzo's men started tailing him in secret. Naruto could sense them skulking in the shadows, root operatives evaluating him like a predator they couldn't quite name. He welcomed it. Let them watch. It wouldn't matter soon. When Kakashi announced that Team 7 had finally been assigned a real mission, a C rank to the Land of Waves, Naruto felt excitement churn in his gut. Maybe he'd get to test his mettle against real threats. On the road out of the village, he deliberately walked a few steps ahead of his teammates. Sasuke's eyes bored into his back, the Uchiha bristling with competitive tension. Every so often, Naruto glanced sideways at Sakura. She tried to talk to Sasuke, but her gaze kept drifting to Naruto's broadening shoulders, as though she could sense a shift in him that was both frightening and strangely mesmerizing. Tazuna, the old bridge builder they were escorting, joked about how puny they looked, but Naruto brushed it off. It wasn't long before two rogue ninja attacked them. Naruto didn't even call out, he simply moved, flickers of red and black aura dancing around him as he disarmed one attacker with a bone-crunching twist of the wrist. The second attacker froze, giving Kakashi and Sasuke the opening to dispatch him. Afterward, Kakashi shot Naruto a look that mixed approval and worry. Sakura couldn't hide a soft gasp. She'd never seen Naruto fight so clinically before. The cracks of bones and the strangled yelps from that attacker stuck in her mind, and she wondered if Naruto even felt a shred of remorse. By the time they arrived in the Land of Waves, they discovered Tazuna was targeted by powerful enemies, namely the fearsome missing nin Zabuza Momochi, one of the legendary Seven Swordsmen. Their first encounter with Zabuza was near the river shrouded in mist. Zabuza loomed on a broad sword, water swirling around him. He taunted Kakashi, excited at the prospect of matching blades with the infamous copy ninja. But Naruto had no time for chest thumping. He sprang forward, ignoring Kakashi's order to hold back. Zabuza hurled a massive slash that would have cleaved Naruto in half, but Naruto leapt up, a half smile on his lips, and let that swirling, cursed aura spark around his limbs. The clang of metal against Naruto's rapidly conjured kunai echoed. Zabuza grunted in surprise, staggering under the freakish force behind Naruto's defense. Sasuke darted in from the flank, and they briefly cornered Zabuza, forcing him to leap away in a swirl of water. Kakashi turned to Naruto, voice tense, "Don't be reckless," but there was also a note of grudging respect. The fight escalated when Zabuza trapped Kakashi in a water prison. Sasuke fought hard to free him, but the difference in skill was too great. Meanwhile, something in Naruto unfurled. He felt a storm building in his chest. He realized how easily he could kill Zabuza if he stopped holding back. But the presence inside him, that voice that was not the Nine Tails, egged him on with mocking laughter. He pictured an array of black lines crawling across his skin. He had no name for it yet, but it felt so right. Naruto formed a quick seal, shouted for Sasuke to coordinate, and launched a barrage of clones. In the confusion, Sasuke used a well-timed barrage of shuriken to force Zabuza to defend. In that moment, Naruto allowed a fraction of the cursed power to slip out. It was more than enough. He felt a surge ripple through him like an ancient tide. He dashed at inhuman speed, appearing behind Zabuza and landing a blow that shattered one of the water clone's torsos. Zabuza's eyes widened at Naruto's unnatural strength. A hint of fear flickered there. That made Naruto grin. Eventually, with teamwork and that small taste of the dark force Naruto commanded, they freed Kakashi, who ended up finishing the fight. Zabuza collapsed, near death, only to be whisked away by a hunter nin who turned out to be his companion, Haku. As the fog cleared, Naruto exhaled, the crackling aura receding. Sasuke stared at him, chest heaving, confusion and rage swirling in his eyes. Sakura ran to check on Naruto, hardly knowing what to say. She pressed a trembling hand to his shoulder, but he dismissed her concern with a curt nod, his expression unreadable. That evening, they took refuge at Tazuna's house. Naruto stared out the window at the moonlit waves. He felt restless. He hadn't unleashed even a fraction of the power within him, and yet he'd almost completely undermined Zabuza's stance. Kakashi approached him quietly, a serious expression behind that mask. "Naruto," Kakashi said, "what was that chakra you used? It didn't feel like the Nine Tails." Naruto stiffened, refusing to turn around. You ask a lot of questions. His own voice was calm, deeper than usual. Kakashi tried again. I need to know if it's dangerous. If it's going to drive you insane or, he trailed off. Naruto finally turned, meeting Kakashi's lone eye with a hard glare. I'm in control, he stated. That's all you need to know for now. Kakashi didn't press, but the suspicion in his gaze was plain. Naruto couldn't bring himself to care. For a split second, the presence inside him chuckled, urging him to lash out, to cut down the meddling sensei. Naruto forced it back. He needed Kakashi as a stepping stone, not as a victim. At least not yet. The next day, Naruto woke early to train alone near the half-finished bridge. The morning mist reminded him of Zabuza's techniques. He wondered when the next ambush would come. He started practicing the shadow clone jutsu, pushing the clones to fight each other, but that felt too routine. He shut his eyes, focusing on the deeper energies swirling in his core. He pictured a monstrous figure with 4 arms, each hand adorned by a mouth full of jagged teeth. In a single breath, a black marking slithered across his right arm. He felt the raw strength that threatened to tear the muscles from his bone if he let it rage unchecked. He exhaled, controlling it. He opened his eyes, and the clone in front of him jolted back in alarm, reading the killing intent in his gaze. With a quick motion, Naruto unleashed a pulse of Scarlet and Midnight D, the clone in a swirl of ephemeral dust. He let out a short, humorless laugh. This was just the beginning. He heard a shuffle behind him. Hinata Hyuga, from Team 8, had come by on an errand to deliver medical supplies to Tezuna's daughter. She must have seen him. Startled, she nearly dropped the supplies when Naruto turned. His eyes were still faintly ringed by that dark aura, though it was already fading. Hinata stared, face pale, but Naruto didn't see condemnation there. If anything, she seemed torn between fear and fascination. Naruto-kun, she began, voice trembling. He arched an eyebrow. You shouldn't sneak up on people, he said lightly, though his tone had an edge to it. She bowed her head in apology, cheeks reddening. For a moment, he felt the stirrings of some old warmth, the memory of how he used to yearn for acknowledgement, how he used to admire her gentle heart. But now a sense of detachment weighed on him. He saw how her eyes were wide, as though she glimpsed a secret she couldn't explain. That was when he noticed the faint curve of a smile on her lips, like she was relieved to see him alive, if not well. He almost mocked her for being so timid, but decided to say nothing. Instead, he brushed past, leaving her behind with fluttering emotions she hardly knew how to handle. When Zabuza and Haku returned for the final showdown on the bridge, the air was thick with tension. Mist rolled in, obscuring everything, and Tezuna cowered behind some planks of wood, trying to salvage whatever was left of his progress. Sakura guarded him, nerves taut, while Kakashi, Sasuke, and Naruto faced the re-emergence of the silent killer and his masked accomplice. Kakashi warned them to stick together, but Naruto had no intention of holding back this time. Haku confronted Sasuke in a swirl of lethal senbon. Zabuza launched at Kakashi. Naruto hovered between both fights, scanning for an opening. He caught glimpses of Sasuke locked in a crystalline dome of ice mirrors. He felt his body surge with anger. Not the righteous kind. He hardly cared about Sasuke's well-being on a personal level, but the idea of someone else overshadowing his potential for violence grated on him. He dashed forward, bypassing Zabuza entirely, determined to tear open the ice dome. As soon as he touched the mirror's reflective surface, a volley of senbon rained down. He snarled, summoning more of that cursed aura. Some projectiles grazed him, drawing blood, but he ignored the pain. He slammed a fist into the mirror, cracks spindling outward. Haku flickered from one reflection to another with blinding speed. Sasuke shouted in frustration, blood dripping from multiple wounds. Naruto, get out, you'll be trapped. But Naruto only smirked, ignoring the prickling of dozens of senbon lodging in his arms and shoulders. He wanted the challenge. He wanted to break that perfect ice into shards. A memory that wasn't his own threatened to surface, an ancient battlefield with cursed spirits howling. Naruto grit his teeth, letting the black markings swirl across his chest and arms for a moment. He could feel his heart pounding, his blood thick with ancient fury. The next instant, he vanished and reappeared inside the dome, face to face with a startled Haku, whose eyes widened behind the mask. "You're fast," Haku said quietly, voice trembling at the realization that Naruto was moving at a speed beyond normal. Naruto let his fist fly. Haku barely evaded. Another hail of senbon slashed the air, but Naruto twisted out of the way, lunging with savage precision. Each blow carried enough force to fracture the mirrors. "You're in my way," he said, voice cold. "Get out, or I'll kill you." Haku hesitated, torn by loyalty to Zabuza. Seeing that slight waver, Naruto struck with a bone-jarring kick. Haku's body flew into one of the mirrors, shattering it with a deafening crash. Outside, the swirl of Kakashi and Zabuza's lethal dance paused for just a heartbeat as the sound resonated. Sasuke stumbled, barely conscious, but relief flickered in his eyes. Naruto seized the moment, hammered the next mirror, and forced an opening. The dome collapsed, and Haku slumped to the ground, trembling with pain. Zabuza, seeing this, roared in fury. He tried to lunge at Naruto, but Kakashi intercepted him. Naruto sensed Sasuke's staggering presence behind him, heard Sakura's distant scream, but everything else became a haze. He strode toward Haku, gaze dark. Haku coughed, tried to stand, but her legs gave out. "I didn't want to harm you," she whispered, sincerity ringing in her tone. "I only wanted to protect Zabuza-sama." Naruto bent down, eyes cold and inquisitive. He felt a pang of disgust, pity. He couldn't place it. "You knew what you were getting into," he murmured. "It's kill or be killed. Don't expect sympathy from me." Haku's eyes shone with tears, but not quite fear. Instead, Naruto sensed a haunting resignation, as if Haku accepted this fate. He raised his hand, black lines twitching across his forearm. He was seconds away from driving a lethal blast of chakra into Haku's chest. Yet something in the back of his mind, maybe an echo of the old Naruto, made him pause. Memories of all the times he'd fought just to be acknowledged, to find a bond. Was he really going to kill someone so broken? The presence inside him urged him forward. Destroy. Show no mercy. He wrestled with it. He found himself unable to deliver the final blow, an unsettling hesitation. He hissed in frustration and turned away. "I won't finish you," he muttered, voice thick with distaste, "but don't mistake that for kindness." Zabuza, upon seeing Haku's state, flew into a rampage. Kakashi unleashed the full might of the Sharingan, and in a violent exchange that happened almost too fast for human eyes, Kakashi outmaneuvered Zabuza and drove a lightning blade through his chest. Blood sprayed across the bridge. Haku choked out a scream, dragging herself toward Zabuza. The hidden mist parted to reveal Gado's hired thugs waiting at the far end of the structure, ready to betray Zabuza. Naruto watched impassively as Zabuza, half dead, took down Gado's men in a final act of savage vengeance before collapsing. A hush fell over the battered remains of the battlefield. Sakura attended to Sasuke, crying. Kakashi wiped sweat from his brow. Chizuna trembled in awe at what had just taken place. All the while, Naruto stood in the center of the splintered boards, dripping with blood that wasn't entirely his, feeling no triumph, no sorrow. Only a hollow, throbbing sense that he wanted more. More fights, more power, more opportunities to push this cursed energy to its limits. That night, in Chizuna's home, the group recovered. Kakashi was silent, lost in thought. Sakura was fussing over Sasuke's injuries. Haku and Zabuza were laid to rest by local villagers, who discovered a strange respect for the fallen rogue ninja. Naruto slipped away to the edge of the forest, compelled by the monstrous energy inside him. There, under a gnarled old tree, he sank to his knees, closed his eyes, and let himself drift into the mindscape. It was different from the usual sewer-like domain of the Nine Tails. It was a dark corridor, lit by scarlet torches. At the end of the corridor stood a hulking figure with eyes like pits of oblivion, the suggestion of a cruel mouth twisting in silent laughter. Naruto approached, heartbeat roaring in his ears. The figure whispered without moving its lips, "You are my vessel. My rebirth." Naruto demanded answers, but the figure gave none, only cryptic promises of glory and slaughter. Then it lunged, dissolving into countless threads of black curses that wrapped around Naruto's body. Naruto screamed, though whether in pain or ecstasy, he couldn't tell. His veins felt like they were on fire. Then, All at once, the figure receded, leaving him gasping in the darkness. He woke, sprawled on the forest floor. Dawn was breaking over the land of waves. He touched his arms and felt the faint remains of those black Marco part of him. No, it had always been part of him, lying dormant until he was ready. As the sun rose, Naruto made his way back to Tezuna's house. He found his team waking up, gathering their things, preparing to return to Konoha. Sasuke shot him a wary glance, but said nothing. Sakura seemed relieved to see him but masked her relief with an awkward cough. Kakashi gave him a nod, though his one exposed eye held more questions than it did answers. They crossed the newly liberated bridge, and villagers gathered to cheer them on, grateful that the menace of Gato was gone. Naruto barely acknowledged the applause. It felt meaningless to him. Once, he would have basked in that validation. Now, he only felt the whisper of that ancient voice, urging him forward to new challenges, new conquests. As they traveled back, Naruto glanced at each of his companions. He found himself vaguely entertained by the thought of surpassing them all. Sasuke with his tragic broodiness, Sakura with her fragile illusions, even Kakashi with his reputation. One day soon, they would all see the truth. He was no mere nine-tails Jinchuriki. He was something infinitely darker and far more dangerous. The grin on his face as they neared the gates of Konoha was half triumphant, half savage. For the first time, he fully acknowledged it. He was Naruto Uzumaki. Yes, but he was also the reincarnation of Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses. And the world would tremble once he fully claimed that title for himself. Chapter 2. They returned to Konoha amid muted sunlight and the low hum of bustling villagers. Kakashi led the way with a casual stride that belied his wariness. Sakura trailed close behind, worried about Sasuke's lingering injuries, while Sasuke kept pace, determined not to show weakness. Naruto walked a few steps off to the side, his hands thrust in his pockets. His eyes were hooded, his demeanor both calm and charged with a strange undercurrent of malice. The moment they stepped through the gates, people stopped and stared. News of the Land of Waves mission had traveled swiftly. The infamous Zabuza had been defeated, Gato's tyranny ended. All thanks to Team 7. Whispers carried across the courtyard. Some gave Naruto a wide berth, sensing that intangible aura that clung to him, more sinister than mere Nine-Tails energy. Naruto felt their apprehension and smirked. He was beginning to revel in the fear. Kakashi dismissed them for the day, instructing them to rest until the Hokage summoned them for a debrief. Sasuke stalked off toward the Uchiha compound without a word. Sakura hesitated, casting Naruto an uneasy glance, then followed Sasuke. Only Naruto remained, gazing after them before heading on his own path. He wasn't in the mood for small talk. Later, outside the Hokage's office, Naruto found himself called in sooner than expected. He arrived in the corridor outside Hiruzen's office to see that two figures waited there. One was Iruka, arms folded, concern etched into his face. The other was Danzo, leaning on his cane, his expression inscrutable. Danzo's single visible eye flicked over Naruto, assessing him with the cold detachment of a predator. Iruka stepped forward. "Naruto, are you all right?" His tone was a mixture of teacherly affection and genuine disquiet. "I heard about what happened in the Land of Waves. They say you were different." "I'm fine," Naruto replied curtly, not in the mood to explain himself. "Got rid of some bad guys. End of story." He tried to push past, but Danzo shifted, blocking his way. The old war hawk studied Naruto's face for a long moment. "You know," Danzo said in a low, almost conspiratorial voice, "power is as much a burden as it is a gift. One must decide carefully how to wield it." Naruto's eyes narrowed. He could sense something about Danzo, an undercurrent of manipulation, a deep hunger for leverage. "Is that a warning?" he asked, keeping his voice carefully level. Danzo merely inclined his head and stepped aside. Iruka started to say something, but Naruto ignored him and slipped into the office. He pretended not to notice Danzo's gaze trailing after him. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Inside, Hiruzen sat behind his desk, pipe in hand, eyes heavy with concern. "Naruto," the Hokage greeted. "I hear your mission in Wave Country was successful. But there are questions." His voice was kind but firm. "What exactly happened on that bridge? Kakashi says you displayed chakra that didn't resemble the Nine Tails." Naruto shrugged. I got stronger. Learned some new tricks. He tried to sound nonchalant, yet a flicker of annoyance twisted inside him at having to justify anything. Hiruzen sighed, exhaling a thin line of smoke. The power you wield is beyond standard ninjutsu. I only ask that if it threatens our village, you come to me first. Understand? A mocking voice inside Naruto's head urged him to scoff. How quaint, that they thought he'd bend so easily. But outwardly he only smiled with a hint of malice that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sure, old man. I'll keep that in mind. Hiruzen nodded, though suspicion lingered in his gaze. Very well. You and your team will have some downtime before the next set of missions. Use it wisely. Naruto offered a casual salute and left. As he passed the corridor, he saw that Danzo was gone. Iruka tried to catch his eye, but Naruto averted his gaze and disappeared into the building's hallway, leaving Iruka behind with a knot of worry in his stomach. Training grounds. Late afternoon. Naruto trudged across a deserted training field, dried leaves crunching underfoot. Memories of that savage presence from the wave mission prickled at the back of his mind, the unstoppable force that had nearly killed Haku without an ounce of remorse. He wanted to see if he could tap into that again at will. The mere thought made his blood hum. He summoned a cluster of shadow clones, ordering them to attack. They darted forward, brandishing kunai in a coordinated assault. Naruto closed his eyes for half a second, reached deep into the well of darkness, and let a thin thread of black and red chakra pulse through his limbs. The next instant, the nearest clone was ripped apart by a focused strike, a blow far more powerful than standard taijutsu. Another clone soared through the air from a backhanded punch. Naruto pivoted, channeling that lethal aura to his fingertips. The final pair of clones hesitated, sensing the predatory shift in their creator's eyes, before Naruto's chakra whipped out in a crackling arc, dispelling them all. He exhaled, chest heaving. This was easier than before. He could feel Sukuna's presence simmering just beneath his skin, awake, urging him on. More, the voice inside him whispered. Push further. A rustle from behind made him whirl around. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was Ino Yamanaka, her bright eyes wide with awe and apprehension. She was clearly torn between stepping forward and bolting away. Ino had been assigned some small recon in the area, but she must have sensed the whirlwind of chakra. Hey, Naruto said brusquely, not bothering to hide the crackle of power around him. You lost? Ino forced a shaky laugh. I just heard a ruckus. Her gaze flicked over the scorch marks in the grass, the lingering air of menace. That wasn't normal chakra, was it? He considered brushing her off. But a sudden idea slipped into his mind. He remembered how the people around him, especially the girls, reacted. Fear, intrigue, curiosity. A swirl of possibilities. You've seen weirder, he teased, letting a half-smile curve his lips. This is just part of who I am. She didn't leave. Instead, Ino took a hesitant step forward. I've seen you around, but you're different lately. Her eyes held a spark of something that almost looked like fascination. I heard rumors you fought Zabuza, like a demon. Naruto chuckled, low and dangerous. That's right. He wasn't so tough. He took a step closer. NCH, though her pulse hammered wildly in her throat. Scared? Ino bit her lip. I'm not an idiot. What you're doing, it's terrifying, but also impressive. I don't know whether to be worried or, I guess I just wanted to see for myself. If there's something going on, maybe I. He cut her off with a raised hand. The cunning part of him recognized that she was caught between curiosity and fear. This was an angle he could use. I appreciate the concern, he said, letting his tone soften a fraction. But I'm fine, Ino. I'm still Naruto. Just better, stronger. She hesitated. Then, as if breaking some inner barrier, she blurted, if you need someone to talk to, I'm not like Sakura, fawning over Sasuke all day. She looked momentarily embarrassed. I'm saying I'll listen. Naruto took stock of her posture, her earnest gaze. A sly sense of amusement rippled through him. He recognized the seeds of attraction, or at least a complicated interest. Thanks, he replied, stepping back. I might take you up on that. As he walked away, he could almost feel her eyes on him, a mixture of caution and something that felt dangerously like admiration. It occurred to him that forging connections with the right people, people drawn in by his aura, might be beneficial, or simply entertaining. Team 7 meeting. Next morning when Naruto arrived at the usual bridge where Team 7 gathered, he found Sakura already there. She seemed more subdued than usual, eyes shadowed with worry. Sasuke leaned against the railing, arms crossed, not sparing anyone so much as a glance. Kakashi eventually appeared in his typical dramatic fashion, greeting them with a lazy wave. "We're here to talk about your progress," Kakashi said, sounding uncharacteristically serious. "Each of you has grown, but Naruto's improvement has been unique." He paused, letting that sink in. Sakura fiddled nervously with her gloves. Sasuke's eyes slid sideways to Naruto, tension clear in his stance. "Kakashi-sensei," Sakura ventured, "have you told the Hokage about whatever is going on with Naruto?" Kakashi inclined his head. "I have. The Hokage is aware, and we're all aware that Naruto's power is unusual." He sighed, then refocused on his team. "But that's not why I called you here. I want to ensure you can still function as a team. There's a lot of friction lately." Naruto said nothing, though an amused sneer tugged at his lips. Friction, indeed. Kakashi suggested a sparring session to gauge their teamwork. He led them to a more private field, flanked by tall trees. The plan was simple. Kakashi would periodically test them with quick strikes, and they had to defend each other. Immediately, Sasuke took the front, eager to show he was still the strongest. Sakura tried to watch their blind spots. Naruto hung back, bored, until Kakashi rushed him. With minimal effort, Naruto blocked the blow, forcing Kakashi to tilt his head in surprise. The next exchange was a flurry. Sasuke pitched in from the side, only to find Naruto had already disarmed Kakashi's attempt. Sakura stood there, momentarily frozen by the speed of it all. In a split second, Kakashi vanished, reappearing behind Sakura with a kunai at her throat. "Your teammate is in danger," Kakashi warned. "What do you do?" Sasuke cursed under his breath, weaving hand seals for a fireball jutsu. Naruto, however, let that dark power surge to life. He was behind Kakashi in an instant, gripping Kakashi's wrist. For a moment, Naruto's eyes glowed with something more than chakra. Kakashi felt it. Like a creeping malevolence that threatened to crush his spirit. "Enough," Naruto growled. Kakashi's brows drew together, astonished. He released Sakura, stepped away, and nodded. "Good reaction," he said calmly, though Naruto caught the wariness in his tone. "But don't let your emotions drive you to extremes. You might regret it." Naruto shrugged, letting the aura recede. Sasuke exhaled in frustration, annoyed that Naruto intervened before he could act. Sakura, hands shaking, thanked Naruto almost reluctantly, as if she wasn't sure whether to be grateful or terrified. Team 7's next high-level mission is on hold, Kakashi informed them. "There's a possibility we'll soon be recommended for the Chunin exams, but only if I'm convinced you can handle yourselves." He glanced at Naruto. "All of you." Naruto met Kakashi's gaze, mask-like. "I'm ready for the exams," he said simply, then turned and walked off. Sakura called after him, but he ignored her. Sasuke shot Kakashi a glare before heading in the opposite direction. Kakashi sighed once they were gone, rubbing the back of his neck. He wondered how long they could keep this semblance of teamwork together with Naruto's rapidly evolving power overshadowing everything. Late evening, Naruto's apartment. Naruto's small, cluttered apartment never felt like home. But as he collapsed on the worn couch, he felt a surge of restlessness. Sukuna's presence churned in his mind. Images flickered behind his eyelids, blood-soaked battlefields, curses rending the air. He swore he even heard that mocking laughter echo in the cramped space. He rose, pulling aside the tattered blinds to gaze at Konoha's moonlit rooftops. "There's more to do," he murmured. Every day, his body felt stronger, more attuned to the ancient curse. But he also sensed that the village was starting to see him as a threat. A soft knock at the door startled him. He frowned. Visitors were rare. When he opened the door, he found Hinata standing there, small and anxious, carrying a wrapped box of ointments. "Naruto-kun," she whispered, cheeks aflame. "I wanted to, bring some medical supplies. I heard from Kurenai-sensei that you might need them after intense training." Her eyes flickered over his arms as if searching for injuries. He stared at her, perplexed and vaguely touched. "Why?" was all he asked. Hinata swallowed hard, trying to maintain eye contact. I wanted to help. You helped my team once, remember? And you look like you push yourself too hard. Naruto stepped aside, silently inviting her in. She entered hesitantly, glancing around the dingy apartment. While she set the box down on a small table, Naruto studied her profile. Hinata was painfully shy, yet her heart seemed genuine in a way that stirred a memory of the old Naruto. Someone who longed for acceptance. He sat across from her. "Thanks," he said, picking up the salve, "but I'm healing fine." She nodded, fumbling with her fingers. "I know, it's just, you've changed so much since the academy. I notice, I see you're stronger, but you seem lonely." Her face heated at her own boldness. His chest tightened. For a moment, he wondered if he should lash out, chase her away. But there was something disarming about her concern. She looked at him not with fear, but with empathy. It unsettled him because it wasn't the usual mixture of dread and fascination he'd begun to expect. He forced a half laugh. "I'm fine," he repeated. "I prefer to train alone." She nodded in understanding, but still lingered. Her eyes flickered to the side of his neck, where a faint mark, a swirling black pattern, just barely showed above his collar. She didn't dare ask, but he saw her confusion. An odd impulse made him pull the collar up, hiding the mark. "Don't worry about it," he murmured. She quickly looked down. "Sorry. I won't pry." She moved toward the door. If you ever need help, or just someone to talk to." She stumbled over her words, "I'd like to be there." The old Naruto might have blushed or stammered. But now, Sukuna's presence coiled in him like a quiet serpent. Still, he managed a nod, "Thanks." With that, Hinata departed, leaving an odd hush in the room. Naruto closed the door and stared at the ointment box. Part of him sneered at the notion of needing help. Another part, smaller and weaker, felt a flick couldn't deny. That war inside him churned until he tossed the box onto a shelf and returned to the window, letting the night breeze wash over his tumultuous thoughts. Training Ground 3 Dawn. Kakashi had arranged a special session for Team 7. The sky was still streaked with pink when Naruto arrived. Sasuke was already practicing his fire release, short bursts of flame dancing along the water's surface. Sakura perched on a log, scanning through a basic ninjutsu handbook. The moment Naruto stepped out of the trees, Sasuke's eyes locked on him, brimming with silent rivalry. Kakashi appeared in a swirl of leaves. "Good, you're all here. Before I finalize my recommendation for the Chunin exams, I need to see you handle a real scenario. 3 attackers, elite Chunin, handpicked, will face you as a team. Your objective is to defend and counter." He paused, letting that sink in. "You win if you can either incapacitate them or survive without losing any member." They barely had time to ask questions before their opponents arrived. A lean kunoichi with an unyielding gaze, a tall shinobi with a scar across his jaw, and a short, wiry man crackling with lightning-based chakra. Sakura gulped. Sasuke cracked his knuckles. Naruto's eyes glinted with anticipation. The fight erupted without warning. The kunoichi targeted Sakura first, forcing her to block with a swiftly conjured earth wall. The tall shinobi intercepted Sasuke's jutsu mid-launch, matching him blow for blow. Meanwhile, the short lightning user charged Naruto, electricity dancing across his arms. Naruto summoned clones, each weaving in and out to keep the attacker guessing. But the enemy was skilled. He blasted through the clones, zeroing in on Naruto's real body with a thunderous punch. Naruto felt the blow glance off his shoulder. Pain flared, but adrenaline spiked. A twisted grin flickered on his lips. With a swift movement, he channeled Sukuna's energy, black lines rippling beneath his skin. He caught the man's next strike, ignoring the electric discharge that sparked against his hands. The man's eyes widened as Naruto's grip tightened, threatening to snap bone. "Not so tough," Naruto hissed, then whirled to smash the opponent against a tree. The trunk splintered on impact, leaves raining down. A moment of silence followed, broken only by the short man's groan. Elsewhere, Sasuke had forced the tall shinobi back with a barrage of shuriken, eyes blazing with the Sharingan. Sakura, surprisingly, held her own with the kunoichi, focusing on defensive tactics until she could land a disorienting genjutsu. The fight was intense, but it was Naruto's savage efficiency that tilted the battlefield in Team 7's favor. Sasuke and Sakura regrouped, breathing heavily. Naruto advanced on the stunned lightning user, but the man's teammates rushed in to protect him, forming a defensive perimeter. In response, Sasuke unleashed a fireball jutsu, forcing them apart. Sakura tossed a flurry of explosive tags. In the chaos, Naruto darted forward, face set in a predatory grin, and delivered a crushing kick to the kunoichi's midsection. She coughed blood and dropped to one knee. The tall shinobi lunged at Naruto, but Sasuke intercepted, sliding beneath the blow and landing a sharp elbow to the ribs. Within minutes, all three opponents were incapacitated. The air crackled with leftover chakra. Sakura's knees almost buckled from fatigue. Sasuke clutched a bruised shoulder. Naruto rolled his neck, letting the remnants of cursed power fade away. He surveyed the damage with a cold satisfaction. The short shinobi lay sprawled among broken branches, the kunoichi gasped for air on the ground, and the tall shinobi stared at Naruto with a mingled sense of defeat and dismay. Kakashi appeared, arms folded. His expression was grave despite the victory. "You passed," he said quietly. All three of them were skilled chunin. "You displayed impressive teamwork, if a bit unorthodox." Sasuke scoffed, not quite satisfied. "We didn't work as a team. Naruto did most of the work." Kakashi said nothing for a moment. Then he turned to Naruto. "You fight with lethal intent. That can be an asset, but it could also be a liability if it blinds you to the bigger picture." Naruto only shrugged. "We won." "True." Kakashi's gaze lingered on the unconscious chunin. "And the price could have been higher if they weren't prepared for a real beating." Sakura, panting, eyed Naruto warily. Sasuke glared at the ground, frustration and jealousy simmering. They had triumphed, but any unity among them felt forced at best. Kakashi finally sighed. "I'll recommend you all for the chunin exams. Prepare yourselves. This next challenge won't be so easily overwhelmed by brute force." Naruto felt a thrill at the mention of the exams. He'd heard rumors of powerful genin from other villages, of life or death battles in the Forest of Death. Another chance to test himself against strong opponents. He met Kakashi's eyes and gave a sharp nod. Evening. Konoha streets. Once released for the day, Naruto wandered aimlessly through the village, ignoring the bustling crowds. His stomach rumbled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since dawn. He considered going to Ichiraku Ramen but changed his mind at the last second. He wasn't in the mood for friendly chatter. As he crossed a quieter street, he noticed Tenten, the weapons specialist from Team Guy, loading supplies into a carrying case near a small shop. Her hair buns bobbed as she carefully placed scrolls into a satchel. Naruto paused, remembering how she'd sometimes watched him with curiosity in passing. On a whim, he approached. "Need a hand?" he asked, voice neutral. Tenten looked up, blinking in surprise. "Naruto. Sure." She passed him a pack of kunai to stack inside. Her eyes swept over him, taking in his aloof air. "Heard you came back from Wave Country a hero. People are talking." He set the kunai down, ignoring the hero comment. "What kind of supplies are these?" She pointed at various scrolls. "Extra weapons for the chunin exams. My teammates and I are training hard. It's going to be intense." Naruto arched a brow. "That's why I'm here too." He folded his arms, leaning against the side of the shop. "Think you can handle it?" "Definitely," Tenten replied, her confidence plain. "I've been practicing summoning techniques non-stop. If we face each other, don't expect me to go easy on you." She grinned, a spark of competitiveness in her eyes. He smirked back. "Same, except I won't hold back." Her gaze flicked over him more carefully, noticing the faint edges of a black marking near his collarbone as he shifted. "You sure you're okay?" she asked, voice tinged with genuine curiosity. "That mark? Sasuke's not the only one with weird power these days, is he?" Naruto lifted a hand to cover the pattern. "Mind your own business," he said, though his tone was less harsh than it might have been. "You'll see soon enough in the exams." Tenten shrugged, letting it drop. "Suit yourself." She slung the case of weapons over her shoulder. "Thanks for the help." He nodded, stepping aside. Before she left, she looked at him again, something softer in her eyes. "Just remember, some of us actually admire your growth, even if it's odd. Don't lose yourself in it." The remark caught him off guard. He watched her walk away, the words echoing in his mind. "Don't lose yourself." A faint scowl creased his face. He wondered if that was even possible. He was still Naruto, but Sukuna's presence was etched into his soul. Was there a line between them anymore? Forest edge. Midnight. Unable to sleep, Naruto ventured into the forest bordering the village. Moonlight filtered through the branches, illuminating faint trails. He let Sukuna's energy flare just enough to sharpen his senses. The night air buzzed with possibility. He stopped near a small clearing where an abandoned shrine stood. Stray vines curled around a broken archway. Place felt ancient, stirring the cursed energy within him. A memory he didn't recognize flitted across his mind. Towering shrines, chanting in an archaic language, the echo of 1,000 curses. The hair on his arms stood on end. Drawing a shuddering breath, he walked inside. Cracked stone altars lay scattered, covered in moss. He knelt beside one, pressing a palm to the cold surface. Energy pulsed in response, black veins crawling across his arm. His heartbeat thundered as he felt Sukuna's presence intensify, a silent roar that threatened to swallow him whole. In that moment, he saw a hazy vision of a monstrous figure, 4 arms, a wicked grin, eyes brimming with sadistic delight. The presence filled his head, whispering, "This world is ours. Spill blood, claim your throne." His mouth went dry, but an undeniable hunger welled up in his chest. He forced himself to stand, stepping away from the crumbling altar. His breath came in ragged gulps. There was something exhilarating about letting the cursed energy take hold, but he knew it was dangerous. If he surrendered to it completely, would he become nothing but Sukuna's puppet? A snapping twig broke his trance. He turned sharply, half expecting an enemy. Instead, he spotted a figure in the shadows. Anbu? No, a woman. A swirl of pink hair caught the moonlight. "Sakura?" he called warily. She stepped into the clearing, face a tapestry of complex emotions. "I was looking for you," she admitted. "Kakashi-sensei said you often wander at night." Naruto let out a harsh laugh. "Spying on me, huh?" Sakura didn't deny it. She glanced around at the broken shrine, arms crossed to ward off the chill. "Why are you here?" He hesitated. He could claim he was training, but that wouldn't explain the eerie aura or the dark lines that still flickered over his skin. Finally, he said, trying to understand, "Myself. That's all." Sakura approached slowly. "Naruto, this power you have, it's scary. Even Kakashi-sensei can't figure it out. But you're still part of Team 7. I don't want to lose that." Something twisted in his chest, anger, guilt, a flicker of the old bond. He almost snapped that she didn't understand anything. But a pang of memory surfaced. The times he'd tried desperately to earn her attention, the small moments of camaraderie between them. He turned away, staring at the broken altar. "You've never really seen me, have you?" he murmured, bitterness creeping into his tone. She frowned. Before she could speak further, black chakra flared around Naruto. His frustration fueled Sukuna's influence. The tension crackled in the air. Sakura took a step back, alarm flashing across her face. He could feel Sukuna's malicious glee urging him to break her illusions, show her how meaningless her pity was. But he wrestled it down. With a visible effort, he tamed the swirling energy. His breathing steadied. "Go home, Sakura," he said flatly. "It's dangerous out here." She lingered, eyes searching his face. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Fine, but, please, be careful." There was a tremor in her voice, an undercurrent of genuine concern that pricked at the remnants of his conscience. Then she turned and left, the sound of her footsteps fading into the night. Naruto closed his eyes. Standing in that deserted shrine, he felt more alone than ever. Yet a voice in the back of his mind, part Sukuna, part something else, whispered, "Power calls to power. Soon, you'll face foes worth killing, and you'll discard these weak attachments." He ground his teeth, unsettled by how right it sounded. Daybreak. Hokage Tower. The next morning, Team 7 gathered in the Hokage's office, along with other prospective Genin teams. The Chunin exams announcement was made official. Iruka stood in the wings, tension on his face, but he held his tongue. Naruto stood next to Sasuke and Sakura, listening with feigned disinterest. Their group was handed registration forms, each Genin glancing at the others. Rock Lee flashed a determined grin at Sasuke. Neji Hyuga eyed Naruto with quiet curiosity. Ino waved at Sakura, though her gaze flickered to Naruto more than once. Tenten offered Naruto a slight nod. Hinata blushed when Naruto's gaze brushed hers. Kakashi gave them a final, terse reminder. You'll be tested on every aspect of your abilities. The risks are real. The chance of injury, or worse, is high. Sasuke smirked. I'm ready. Sakura glanced at Naruto, steeling herself. Me too. Naruto let his lips curve into a smirk, cold and confident. Then let's see who survives. A hush fell across the room. For a moment, even Sasuke couldn't mask his unease at Naruto's tone. But no one spoke. The registration concluded, teams dispersing to prepare themselves. As Naruto left, he felt the weight of many gazes on his back, fear, suspicion, and fascination melding into one. He turned a corner and spotted Danzo briefly in the hall, that calculating eye watching him. Naruto's heart pounded with anticipation. The stage was set. The Chunin exams would be his next playground, a chance to unleash Sukuna's power against real competitors. And if Konoha, and the rest of the ninja world, trembled in the aftermath, so be it. He shoved his hands into his pockets, walking out into the sunlight, a slow grin spreading across his face. Let them all see what the King of Curses could do, cloaked in the form of Naruto Uzumaki. No one would stand in his way. Chapter End. Chapter 3. The Chunin exams loomed like a storm over Konoha, stirring the village into frenetic energy. Genin teams from every major hidden village trickled through the gates, each brimming with ambition or grudges. Stalls popped up overnight, hawking limited edition weapons and exotic foods to the influx of shinobi. Beneath the festive veneer, tension thrummed. Whispers about dangerous newcomers abounded in the streets. Hidden Leaf citizens glanced over their shoulders, remembering prior tragedies during these exams. And above all else, rumors about Naruto Uzumaki, now rumored to be far more than a Nine-Tails host, circulated among the ranks. Early morning, Academy Lecture Hall Team 7 entered the Academy's main hall, where the first phase of the Chunin exams would be announced. The place buzzed with clashing personalities. Rock Lee's polite greetings clashed with Kiba's rowdy jokes. Gaara of the Sand stood in a corner like a predatory shadow, and various teams huddled in hushed strategy talks. Naruto strolled in, hands in his pockets, ignoring the startled looks aimed his way. He'd grown accustomed to them, some tinged with awe, others with outright anxiety. Standing at the front of the hall was Ibiki Morino, the exam's proctor for the written test. His scarred face seemed to set the tone, harsh and unwavering. Teams fell into single-file rows as Ibiki barked instructions, explaining that they'd be tested on intelligence gathering and psychological pressure. Sakura listened intently, worry etched on her face. She remembered how Naruto hated written exams. Sasuke was already glancing around, scoping out potential threats. Naruto, by contrast, appeared uninterested, leaning back with an arrogant tilt to his chin. "Pav, Naruto, Ibiki's instructions slipped through my ears. It's all about cheating without getting caught. The old me might have panicked over this nonsense, but now, it's trivial. If I really want the answers, I can just coax them out of someone's mind, or intimidate them until they slip up. Even so, I sense it'll be more entertaining to pass without needing much fuss." He looked sideways. Ino, seated a row behind, winked conspiratorially as if hinting she could mind transfer the answers. Naruto gave a thin smile but shook his head. He could practically feel the swirl of cursed energy in his veins, reminding him that these petty written tests were beneath him. Hinata, on his other side, nudged a spare set of answers toward him under the table. He acknowledged her with a quick nod, though he likely wouldn't, and the final question was announced. Ibiki's infamous do-or-die query. Several genin cracked under the psychological weight, dropping out to avoid risking their careers. Naruto remained utterly unshaken. The moment Ibiki revealed that the last question was really a test of courage, Naruto's smirk deepened, and he felt the anxious stares of those around him. It was as if they realized he'd never even considered quitting. Ibiki dismissed the survivors with a gruff, "Congratulations on passing the first test." Everyone who remained exhaled in relief. Everyone except Naruto, who yawned, already eager for whatever came next. After the written exam, Academy rooftop, the stragglers from the test filed into the open rooftop area, where a gust of wind ruffled uniforms and scattered fallen leaves. Anko Midarashi, the proctor for the second stage, perched on the railing with an impish grin, ready to address the successful candidates. All right, kiddies, she called out, her voice slicing through the chatter. We're moving straight into the second exam. The Forest of Death. Survival, infiltration, combat, anything goes. And if you're squeamish, you might want to quit now. She seemed to take special notice of Naruto. Her sharp eyes swept over him. You look cocky, Blondie. Think you can handle it? Naruto shrugged, returning her gaze unflinchingly. I can handle anything, he said bluntly. The confidence in his voice was absolute, verging on menacing. A passing glance from Sasuke suggested he found the display grating, but he remained silent. Tamari of the Sand, standing near Gaara and Kankuro, smirked when she caught Naruto's response. Lots of big talk in this village, she remarked, though her gaze lingered on Naruto's figure as if trying to gauge just how serious he was. Watch and see, Naruto returned, his voice carried by the wind. A flicker of black aura threatened to shimmer around his fingertips, but he kept it subdued. Not yet. Anko rolled her eyes at their exchange. Then meet me at the Forest of Death by dawn tomorrow, she announced. Trust me, you'll need every minute to prepare. Nightfall. Naruto's apartment. A restless energy seized Naruto. He paced the cramped living space, staring at the glow of streetlights through the blinds. Tomorrow, the Forest of Death would provide the perfect proving ground for stronger foes. The thought fed the coiling presence of Sukuna within him. A faint knock on his door startled him, this time, 2 knocks. He opened it, unsurprised to see Ino and Tenten standing side by side. Their expressions were different. Ino looked flirtatiously confident, arms crossed. Tenten seemed more guarded but curious. Girls' night, Naruto asked wryly. Ino planted a hand on her hip. Just wanted to see how you're prepping for tomorrow, she said. Some of us are forming alliances, you know, exchanging intel, watching each other's backs. It's not all cutthroat just yet. Tenten chimed in, Neji's sure we'll pass easily, but I like to know where everyone stands, especially someone like you. Her eyes flicked to the faint black lines trailing up Naruto's neck, mostly hidden by his collar. Naruto leaned against the doorframe. So, you want to form an alliance? He sounded more amused than anything. Ino shrugged, flicking her blonde hair over one shoulder. We can help each other survive. I can link up minds to gather info. Tenten's got enough weapons to supply a small army. You've got raw power that's. She paused, noticing the tension in Tenten's gaze, unique. And Team 7's got Sasuke, so basically, you're set. Naruto studied them. It was an interesting prospect. He wasn't exactly brimming with team spirit, but aligning with more people could serve as a strategic advantage, especially if it let him pit them against powerful foes while he tested the extremes of Sukuna's power. All right, he said, but let's keep it loose. In that forest, anything can happen. Ino exchanged a quick look with Tenten, then nodded. Loose alliance. If we run into each other, we won't kill each other, yet. Tenten gave a faint snort. Nice, Ino. Very diplomatic. She turned back to Naruto. Anyway, good luck, I guess. As they departed into the dimly lit corridor, Naruto watched them go, his thoughts whirling. He saw how Ino's lips curved into a self-assured smile before the door shut. Something about how these kunoichi were drawn to him, through curiosity, fear, or ambition, both amused and intrigued him. He still felt more comfortable alone, but his lethal magnetism was forging connections whether he intended it or not. Forest of Death entrance. The next morning the sprawling gates of Training Ground 44, ominously called the Forest of Death, loomed like giant maws ready to swallow the genin. The exam proctor, Anko, paced in front of the assembled teams, explaining the rules. Every squad would receive either an Earth Scroll or a Heaven Scroll, and to pass, one needed to collect the opposite scroll as well. The forest itself, filled with giant predators and unknown traps, was a deadly gauntlet. Failure often meant death. Naruto stood with Sasuke and Sakura while the other teams spread out. He caught glimpses of Gaara's cold eyes from the far side, and Rock Lee, who waved politely. A swirl of tension hung in the damp morning air. Pav, Sakura, she glanced at Naruto, who radiated calm confidence. The difference from the boy she once knew was staggering. She wasn't sure if she missed that old Naruto's goofy grin. Part of her felt safer with this new version, terrifying as he was, because it felt like no enemy could challenge him. Anko cut her speech short with a wicked grin. Let the second stage begin. She signaled for the gates to open. Teams darted inside, some rushing in headlong, others hanging back, looking for easy prey. Naruto didn't hesitate. With a nod from Sasuke, Team 7 sprinted into the foliage, the thick canopy swallowing them up. Instantly, the environment changed. Thick vines, buzzing insects, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. Sakura kept a watchful eye while Sasuke led, scanning for potential ambush. Naruto hung behind, scanning the shadows. He could sense living presences all around him. Some were just giant leeches or oversized snakes, but others felt distinctly human, hungry for scrolls and blood. Barely half an hour in, a massive gust of wind roared through the trees, scattering leaves and branches. A kunoichi from the grass village leapt into their path, her eyes alight with unnatural excitement. Sakura recognized her from the starting line. Naruto felt an immediate surge of caution. Her presence wasn't just that of a typical genin. A sinister aura radiated from her, something that made Sukuna's energy stir in response. She introduced herself in a raspy voice, "Let's see what you're made of, Team 7. Then she stretched her neck in a way that made her look inhuman. The fight commenced in a flash. Sasuke hurled shuriken, Sakura launched kunai, but the kunoichi dodged effortlessly. Naruto felt a spark of savage glee. This was no ordinary opponent. Good. When she lunged, Naruto intercepted. Their clash was brief but intense. He felt her monstrous strength, far more than typical for a genin. She twisted away, eyes lighting up as if she recognized the cursed air radiating off him. Interesting, she hissed, grinning. You're not like the others. Ha! Orochimaru, in disguise. He smirked behind the grass nin's face, feeling the vile power swirling in Naruto. This was beyond the nine tails. Something ancient, an echo of a monstrous curse. Orochimaru's heart pounded with twisted delight. He'd come here to mark Sasuke, but now, Naruto presented a far more tantalizing mystery. The disguised Orochimaru pressed his hands into a seal, summoning giant serpents that slithered from the undergrowth. Sasuke cursed and leapt back, fire flickering in his hands. Sakura tried to reinforce him, but the serpents were relentless. Naruto ignored the lesser snakes. His gaze locked onto the grass kunoichi. With an exhale, he let a fraction of Sukuna's malevolence surge forward. Black lines crawled up his arm, eyes flashing with savage intent. He lunged, faster than human reflex should allow, and slammed a punch into her side. Orochimaru felt the shock of impact reverberate through his stolen body, coughing blood as he was sent crashing into a tree. Pathetic, Naruto sneered. He expected her to collapse. Instead, she rose, a slow cackle echoing through the clearing. Her face peeled back, revealing a sliver of Orochimaru's pale features. Sasuke froze, eyes wide. Sakura gasped in horror. Orochimaru, only half revealed, licked his lips, eyes brimming with lunatic satisfaction. Such power, he hissed at Naruto. You're a delicious anomaly. Then, in a blur, he whipped around and slammed a palm against Sasuke's neck, unleashing the cursed seal in a swirl of malevolent chakra. Sasuke screamed, dropping to his knees as the seal carved its way across his flesh. Naruto felt his rage spike. This serpent had ignored him. How dare he? With a snarl, Naruto mustered more of Sukuna's energy, forging a blade of pulsing black chakra in his hand. He rushed Orochimaru, aiming to take his head clean off. Orochimaru only barely twisted away, losing a chunk of the disguise's shoulder in the process. Blood splattered, and he hissed in both pain and fascination. How marvelous, Orochimaru breathed, voice dripping with rapture. But I'm out of time. We'll meet again, my dear Naruto Uzumaki. Then he vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving behind a still screaming Sasuke and a stunned Sakura. Naruto clenched his fists, black chakra swirling around him, wanting to chase Orochimaru down, to crush him. But he caught sight of Sasuke convulsing on the ground. Sakura frantically tried to keep him still. A trickle of concern, maybe for Sasuke, maybe for the team, pulled him back from the brink. Damn it, Naruto growled, letting the cursed aura ebb. He knelt by Sasuke, feeling the thrumming dark chakra from Orochimaru's mark. He's messing with you, Naruto muttered, gripping Sasuke's shoulder. Sasuke's eyes fluttered, half conscious. Pain twisted his features, but a flicker of recognition passed over his face as he mumbled, "Naruto, what the hell are you?" Naruto ignored the question, focusing on the immediate threat. If more enemies showed up now, Sasuke was helpless. "We need shelter," he told Sakura. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, and helped Naruto carry Sasuke deeper into the forest. Forest depths. Temporary shelter. Sakura found a hollowed tree trunk flanked by dense foliage, enough to hide them from casual scouting. She positioned Sasuke inside, propping him up on a makeshift bed of leaves. His breathing was ragged, sweat streaming down his face. The cursed mark pulsed like a living thing across his neck. Naruto stood guard at the entrance, arms crossed. His senses flared, scanning the area. Tension coiled inside him. The battle with Orochimaru had ended in frustration. For all his power, he couldn't stop that serpent from escaping. Worse, the snake had recognized Sukuna's presence and seemed enthralled by it. "Stay alive," Naruto muttered, glancing at Sasuke's pale form. "I'm not letting that freak claim you. You and I still have a score to settle." Hours passed. Sakura tended to Sasuke as best she could. The forest's shadows grew long. At one point, a group of sound nin attacked, drawn by the lure of Sasuke's weakened state. Sakura fended them off with surprising grit. Naruto, stepping in only when it seemed they might overwhelm her, unleashed a terrifying pulse of cursed energy that sent the sound nin reeling. They fled, battered and shaken, leaving Team 7 battered but intact. Sakura collapsed next to Sasuke, chest heaving. "You could have jumped in earlier," she scolded Naruto between gasps. His expression remained cold. "You needed to learn, but I wasn't going to let them kill you." Though harsh, a strange reassurance colored his words. Sakura found herself torn between anger at his cruelty and relief at his readiness to step in. She didn't understand this new Naruto at all, but at least he hadn't abandoned them. Night draped the forest in pitch darkness. Owls screeched overhead, and the rustle of predators sounded all around. Sakura fought off drowsiness to keep watch. Naruto, however, stood alert, as if he didn't need sleep. Sukuna's energy thrummed in his blood, granting him an unnatural stamina. But it also whispered of violence, urging him to hunt. He fought the urge down. He needed Sasuke awake and the team stable to continue. When dawn broke, Sasuke stirred, the cursed seal receding, leaving him drained and haunted. Sakura gasped in relief, hugging him. Sasuke pulled away, eyes lowered in shame or confusion. Naruto merely watched. "We have to get the Heaven Scroll or Earth Scroll, whatever we're missing," Sasuke said softly. "We can't fail." Naruto nodded. "Then let's move." Encounter near the tower. On the third day, with Sasuke back on his feet, though clearly not at full strength, Team 7 finally ambushed the Rain Nin trio carrying the missing scroll. The fight was swift but brutal. Naruto battered one enemy to the ground, leaving the other two to Sasuke and Sakura. Their synergy wasn't perfect, but fear of Naruto's overshadowing power seemed to drive Sasuke and Sakura to prove themselves. Within minutes, the Rain Nin lay unconscious, and Sasuke held up the stolen scroll with a grim smile. With both scrolls in hand, Team 7 raced for the central tower. They arrived just in time, battered and disheveled. Relief washed over Sakura. Sasuke's gaze burned with unresolved anger, about Orochimaru, about Naruto's unstoppable might overshadowing his own. And Naruto. He was calm, even bored, anticipating the next stage. His brief skirmishes felt unsatisfying. Deep down, he wanted another crack at Orochimaru, or anyone else strong enough to test him. They entered the tower's dim corridor, discovering that many teams hadn't made it. In the central hall, exhausted survivors slumped against walls, comparing injuries. A few pairs shot covert looks at Naruto, who returned their stares with an icy smirk. He noticed Ino and Tenten off to the side. Both looked relieved to see Naruto alive. Hinata, standing near Kurenai, managed a tiny wave that he half acknowledged with a nod. Temari caught his eye, then turned away with a pensive frown, as if analyzing him from a distance. Preliminary battles announced. Just as the tension began to ease, a squad of proctors arrived, flanked by the Hokage himself, Hiruzen. His presence drew a respectful hush over the crowd of genin. Behind him stood the ever-watchful figure of Danzo, half in the shadows, and close by was the imposing Morino Ibiki. In front stepped Hayate Gecko, the coughing proctor who oversaw the next stage. Due to the large number of teams that made it through, Hayate announced in a strained voice, "We'll conduct preliminary matches to thin the ranks. If you're unable to fight, withdraw now." Several injured participants, including some from the Sound Village, stepped away. Kabuto Yakushi, a leaf shinobi with silver hair, also chose to withdraw, smiling politely as he cited injuries. Naruto felt something off about Kabuto but chose not to dwell on it. Hayate then explained the rules. Individuals would be matched randomly in single combat. Defeat meant elimination. The winner advanced to the final tournament. He gestured to a massive screen that would reveal each matchup. Nervous murmurs fluttered through the hall. Naruto's eyes locked on the screen, blood thrumming. He yearned for a challenge, for someone who wouldn't break so easily. The first names flashed. Sasuke Uchiha versus Yoroi Akato. Sasuke stiffened, stepping forward with a determined set to his jaw. His cursed seal remained a simmering threat, but he refused to. Sasuke's fight began in a swirl of tension. Yoroi could absorb chakra by touch, forcing Sasuke on the defensive. The entire crowd watched with bated breath. Naruto stood with crossed arms, ignoring the anxious chatter from Sakura. He couldn't deny a small sense of curiosity. Would Sasuke crumble under Orochimaru's mark? Mid-battle, Sasuke's cursed seal threatened to flare. A look of horror twisted his features. But he forced it down, summoning his last reserves of strength, and executed a surprise move reminiscent of Rock Lee's taijutsu that he'd copied. Yoroi staggered, disarmed, and Sasuke pinned him flat with a punishing blow. The proctor declared Sasuke the winner. Relief washed over Sakura. Naruto merely grunted. Sasuke cast a weary glance at Naruto from the arena floor, as if checking whether he'd earned Naruto's respect. Naruto offered no outward reaction, but he recognized Sasuke's resilience. Orochimaru's meddling hadn't broken the Uchiha yet. Orochimaru, lurking above in the rafters. His golden, snake-like eyes narrowed on Naruto. He didn't care that Sasuke had resisted the seal. His real fascination was that swirl of cursed energy in Naruto, more potent than even the Nine Tails. Orochimaru's grin widened. Soon, he would dissect the boy's secrets. One way or another. Back on the arena floor, Hayate announced the next match, Zaku Abumi vs. Shino Aburame. The subsequent battles would continue until everyone had faced off or been eliminated. Naruto waited impatiently for his name to appear. Meanwhile, he noticed a pattern. The stronger combatants from outside Konoha, like Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro, won their matches swiftly, often with an undercurrent of chilling brutality. Gaara's sand-based attacks left his opponent trembling on the ground. Temari's wind scythe technique toyed with her foe before finishing him off. Kankuro's puppet play took out a rain nin in a single, decisive trap. Finally, after several tense matches, the screen flickered. The next two names appeared. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba flinched, then plastered on a grin that didn't quite mask his unease. He stepped forward with Akamaru at his side, muttering, "Well, this'll be interesting." Around them, the remaining genin shifted, some intrigued, others pitying Kiba. Everyone knew Naruto had become something else entirely. They took positions at opposite ends of the circular arena floor. Kiba crouched, Akamaru growling, prepared to go all out. Naruto rolled his neck, letting a faint hum of cursed aura swirl around him. The tension was electric. Hayate raised his hand. "Begin." Kiba wasted no time, hurling himself forward in a whirlwind of claws and fangs. He moved in a blur, boosted by Akamaru's help. A lesser shinobi might have been overwhelmed by the feral assault. Naruto, though, only shifted aside with terrifying ease, slipping through Kiba's strikes. When Kiba lunged again, Naruto's palm shot out and caught him by the wrist. A hush fell. In the stands above, Sakura and Sasuke watched, equal parts mesmerized and horrified. In that instant, Kiba's expression changed from fierce determination to stunned alarm. Naruto's grip crushed down with inhuman force, and Kiba gasped. "You're out of your league," Naruto said calmly. He released a pulse of his cursed energy, and Kiba's muscles seized. Akamaru snarled, leaping to defend Kiba, but Naruto backhanded the pup mid-air with a carefully controlled strike, sending it whimpering to the side, injured but not mortally so. I'll decide how hard I hit, Naruto said coldly, tossing Kiba aside. Kiba rolled across the floor, wincing in pain. The entire room felt Naruto's malicious aura. He advanced, unimpressed. You want to keep going? Kiba, pride wounded, tried to stand. Akamaru, we're not giving up. He formed the man-beast clone jutsu, turning Akamaru into a mirror image of himself. Both Kibas spun into a drilling tunneling fang, twin cyclones ripping toward Naruto. Naruto let them come, eyes narrowed. He raised an arm, letting black lines shimmer across his forearm. At the last moment, he released a shockwave of cursed chakra. The swirling fang attacks collided with that wave, and both Kiba and his clone were violently repelled. One slammed into the arena wall, the other crashed into the ground. Naruto stood unmoved. A hush crept across the room. Even Kakashi, watching from the sidelines, tightened his grip. He saw no flicker of mercy in Naruto's stance, only an almost bored finality. Kiba lay prone, coughing. Akamaru reverted to dog form nearby, unconscious. With labored breaths, Kiba admitted defeat, shutting his eyes in frustration. I can't beat you. Hayate called the match. Winner. Naruto Uzumaki. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, then scattered applause broke out. Naruto turned on his heel, heading for the stairs without a backward glance. In the stands, Ino exhaled, relieved. Tenten shook her head, lips pressed in a tight line. Hinata looked torn, heartbreak in her eyes at seeing Kiba so decisively crushed. Yet she also felt an unspoken admiration for Naruto's overwhelming strength. Sasuke, arms folded, watched Naruto approach with a brooding stare. Did you have to be so ruthless? He muttered under his breath. Naruto shrugged, gazing down at the arena floor where medics tended to Kiba and Akamaru. If he can't handle it, he shouldn't be here. Their conversation was interrupted by the next names appearing on the screen, pulling everyone's attention. As the final matches played out, Rock Lee vs. Gaara in a spectacular clash, Choji vs. Dosu, Hinata vs. Neji, Naruto observed with clinical interest. He offered no cheers, no words of encouragement, but mentally catalogued every jutsu, every potential weakness in the others. By the end, the battered winners lined up. Among them stood Gaara, Temari, Kankuro, Neji, Shikamaru, Sasuke, and, of course, Naruto. The tension was palpable, each wore bruises, bandages, or a quiet air of exhaustion. Yet for Naruto, a restless hunger lingered. Naruto. I scanned the crowd of finalists. Not many left. None of them look strong enough to push me. Maybe Sasuke, if he masters that cursed seal. Or Gaara, if those rumors about his sand are true. Still, I want more. Orochimaru is lurking somewhere, watching. Let him. I'll show them all that the King of Curses won't be denied. Hiruzen stepped forward, congratulating them on surviving thus far. In 1 month, you will face the final tournament. Use the time to prepare. You'll each be matched in single combat. Succeed, and you prove your worth as a Chunin. Fail, and face the consequences. Naruto's eyes flickered with anticipation. 1 month to train, to refine the monstrous energy he carried. 1 month until he could crush the competition beneath his heel in front of the entire village. He smirked, the echoes of Sukuna's laughter dancing at the edge of his mind. Chapter End. Chapter 4. The month-long respite before the Chunin exam finals began with a crackle of tension rippling through Konoha. Despite the bright sun over the training grounds, anxiety lingered among the finalists. Some vanished from public view, diving into rigorous, private drills. Others scoured the village's archives, devouring scrolls of jutsu. Rumors of Orochimaru's infiltration spread in hushed whispers, fanning the flames of paranoia. And weaving through it all was Naruto Uzumaki, the reincarnation of Ryomen Sukuna, biding his time for a confrontation worth his wrath. Morning. Hokage's office. Hiruzen summoned the finalists one by one to inform them of the month's grace period. Though out of breath from the many pressing matters, the Hokage maintained a firm posture. Naruto entered the office last, giving a brief, insolent tilt of his head. 2 Anbu guards hovered near the corners, shifting at Naruto's mere presence. Your battles in the finals will be the village's spectacle, Hiruzen said, voice laced with both caution and respect. But more than that, it our readiness for the rank of Chunin. Use this time to grow, Naruto. Naruto gave him a thin, almost mocking smile. Don't worry, old man. I plan to. Danzo lingered behind Hiruzen, half hidden by shadows. His single eye studied Naruto with cold fascination, as if measuring how best to harness or eliminate this volatile force. Naruto let their gazes lock for a moment. Neither blinked. If that's all, Naruto asked, leaving the question hanging. Hiruzen dismissed him with a strained nod. Naruto turned on his heel. As he passed Danzo, he caught a faint whiff of contempt. He couldn't help but smirk. Danzo's fear was so deliciously obvious. Training ground 3 later that day. Warm noon light filtered through the canopy. Naruto found a quiet spot near the water where smooth stones bordered the river's edge. He kicked off his sandals and stepped into the shallows, focusing on channeling Sukuna's energy through his limbs. A swirl of black lines pulsed across his wrists. The water around him trembled, responding to his aura. He pictured conjuring a domain similar to Sukuna's illusions. He wanted to refine it, shape it into a jutsu that would bend any battlefield to his will. But controlling that much cursed power in a single burst risked exposing everything. Even so, the idea teased him. He was about to push further when a light cough sounded behind him. Jiraiya, white-haired, tall, with a toad-shaped grin, stood a respectful distance away, hands stuffed in his pockets. Yo, Jiraiya said, studying Naruto's markings. You've got a lot going on there, kid. Naruto gave him a sidelong glance. You're the Sannin who pokes around hot springs, right? A corner of Jiraiya's mouth twitched. So Kakashi's told you about me. Then you know I'm here to help you tap into the Nine Tails chakra, if you're willing. Naruto looked back at the rippling water, unconvinced. My power isn't just the fox, he said bluntly. I'm aware, Jiraiya replied, voice lower. Orochimaru is sniffing around. If you get lost in your newfound strength, you'll be easy pickings for him. I can't force you to train with me, but I'm offering my expertise. A prickly silence settled. Naruto understood Jiraiya's concern. The village wanted to ensure their Jinchuriki, even if warped by some cursed force, didn't fall into the wrong hands. He considered it. Jiraiya wasn't weak. Training with him might yield new angles for his own power. Fine, Naruto relented, but don't lecture me about self-control. Jiraiya chuckled, relieved at Naruto's acceptance. We'll see how well you handle a summoning technique. Meet me at the North Plateau tomorrow morning. Naruto turned away, letting that swirl of black fade from his arms. Sure, he said, already plotting how to twist summoning into a conduit for Sukuna's brand of destructive might. Konoha streets, afternoon. After parting ways, Naruto wandered through the village market. The usual festive air felt muted. Shinobi from other lands roamed, tension etched in their postures. He passed a fruit stall where Tenten was haggling with the owner over travel rations. Ino waited beside her, flipping her hair impatiently. Their eyes lit up at seeing him. Training with the pervy sage, huh? Ino teased, using the nickname she'd heard around. Rumor says he's a legendary Sannin. Naruto shrugged. If he has something useful to teach, I'll learn it. Tenten handed the shopkeeper a few coins. Don't push yourself too hard, she said, sliding her scrolls of weapons into a pouch. We still have a spar scheduled, remember? I want to see if my new techniques can handle that monstrous chakra of yours. Ino smirked, hooking an arm around Tenten's shoulders in a playful gesture. That's right, we're teaming up on you, Naruto. Consider it a practice match before the finals. Naruto eyed them. Both of you at once. Afraid, Ino challenged, though her tone was half flirting. A faint blush tinged her cheeks. He shook his head with a low chuckle. Fine, but don't whine if you get hurt. They parted ways on that note, a subtle tension thrumming in the air, equal parts rivalry and attraction. Naruto felt a stir of amusement. The girl's confidence might be overshadowed by his power, but they were no longer trembling novices. They wanted to test themselves, and part of him respected that drive. Next morning, North Plateau outside Konoha, a vast, rocky plateau spread under the pale sky, peppered with cracks and jagged outcroppings. Jiraiya stood near a boulder, arms folded, waiting for Naruto. Let's see if you can handle the summoning jutsu, he began. The key is drawing out the Nine Tails chakra, merging it with your own life force, and forming a contract with the toads. He handed Naruto a scroll depicting toad silhouettes.
Naruto stared at the scroll. I'm not sure that's the contract I want. Sukuna's presence stirred in the back of his mind, scornful of any alliance that didn't bow to him. Still, he saw potential. Summoning monstrous toads could be a stepping stone for harnessing greater illusions or cursed constructs.
Jiraiya motioned for him to bite his thumb and sign the scroll with blood. Naruto complied, albeit grudgingly. Focus your chakra, form the seals. Boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram, Jiraiya instructed. Channel the 9 tails. Don't hold back. Naruto did as told, though he also let threads of cursed energy intertwine with the fox's chakra. An uneasy swirl took shape in his gut. He slammed a palm to the ground. In a billowing explosion of smoke, something huge emerged.
A monstrous toad, easily 20 meters tall, materialized, but its features distorted, edges flickering with a blackish hue as if corrupted by Sukuna's aura. The toad let out a guttural croak, thrashing its massive tongue. Jiraiya's eyes bulged. What? He started, but the toad lashed out, nearly knocking him aside. Naruto leapt onto the creature's head, black lines rippling up his neck, forcing the summon to obey. For a moment, man and beast were at odds, the toad frenzied by the cursed energy saturating its summoning link. Calm down, Naruto snarled, pressing a surge of authority through the chakra bond. The toad shuddered, as though battling conflicting forces. Its eyes flicked to Jiraiya, then back to Naruto. Slowly, it stilled, letting out a reluctant croak.
Jiraiya approached, heart hammering. You fused the 9 tails chakra with something else. Summons shouldn't look like this. He studied the toad's swirling patterns, alarm plain on his face. Naruto hopped down. Guess my power doesn't play nice, he said, not bothering to hide his grim satisfaction. With a poof of smoke, the toad vanished, unwilling to stay anchored in that twisted domain. Jiraiya drew a slow breath. Kid, this is dangerous. You need to be careful. Naruto's jaw tightened. I'm tired of warnings. If a Sannin can't handle it, maybe you're not worth my time.
Instead of anger, Jiraiya's expression reflected genuine concern. Stop letting your power define you. Your life is more than Sukuna or the 9 tails. Naruto sneered. That's where you're wrong. Without another word, he stomped off, leaving Jiraiya troubled in his wake. Afternoon. Lakeside spar, Naruto vs. Ino and Tenten. Naruto strode along the calm lakeshore where he'd agreed to meet Ino and Tenten. The sunlight sparkled over the water's surface. A stone plateau extended a few meters into the lake, perfect for a sparring match. Ino and Tenten waited, each wearing practical training attire. Ino's stance looked surprisingly firm, while Tenten had a scroll in each hand, a confident tilt to her chin. This is just to push ourselves, Tenten reminded, unsealing a flurry of gleaming kunai. No lethal strikes if we can help it. Naruto shrugged. Fine by me. They began without further warning. Tenten hurled a wave of kunai and shuriken. Ino darted her hands, weaving the beginnings of a mind transfer attempt. Naruto stood his ground, letting a faint swirl of cursed chakra dance around his arms. Metal projectiles ricocheted off a near-invisible barrier of twisted energy. Ino found her vantage point compromised by a flick of Naruto's wrist, which sent black arcs of power toward her. She dove aside, adrenaline spiking. Tenten, she called. Tenten launched into an aerial flip, pulling a larger scroll. Her summoning technique spat out a giant spiked chain. With a graceful swing, she aimed to entangle Naruto. Naruto read the motion, stepping back. Yet the chain whipped around, guided by Tenten's skillful aim, snapping at his ankles. For a moment, it snared him. Ino seized the opening, racing in for a palm strike, hoping to deliver her clan's mental disruption at close range. Naruto smirked. These two have improved, he thought. But the difference in their power was still immense. In a swift burst, he ignited that dreaded aura. The chain's links cracked under sudden pressure, forcing Tenten to release it. Ino's strike missed by inches, thrown off by the shockwave of cursed chakra. Before she could retreat, Naruto snatched her wrist. He pinned her arm behind her back, ignoring her gasp. Tenten launched a barrage of senbon to free Ino. Naruto deflected them with his free hand, the black lines across his forearm shimmering ominously. He whispered in Ino's ear, "Surrender," releasing just enough killing intent to make her flinch. Her knees buckled, but Tenten intervened, slashing in with a short blade. Naruto twisted away, letting Ino go. Tenten's blade came within a hair's breadth of his throat. He ducked, then struck with a palm thrust. She blocked, only for the impact to send her skidding back. Ino steadied herself, eyes blazing. We're not done yet. She darted forward, hurling a small flash bomb. The air erupted with brilliant light. Naruto snarled, momentarily blinded. Tenten capitalized, chaining together a sequence of airborne slashes. Metal clashed against Naruto's forcibly conjured defense. As his vision returned, Naruto's fury spiked. He caught Tenten's wrist mid-slash and spun her, disarming her with brutal efficiency. Ino tried another flank, but he neutralized her too, his reflexes simply on another level. Within seconds, he had them both at his mercy, pinned on the rocky lakeshore with a rising tide licking at their ankles.
Yield, Naruto growled. His voice hummed with that underlying malice. Tenten's chest heaved, muscles trembling. Ino bit her lip, glaring, determined not to appear weak. But the unstoppable force pinned them firmly. Finally, Tenten dropped her last kunai. We yield. Naruto eased his grip, stepping back. The cursed aura faded, leaving behind the faint sound of water lapping at rocks. Ino stood, rubbing her bruised wrist, but her defiant stare didn't waver. Tenten staggered upright, a flicker of frustration on her face. That was intense, Tenten admitted, exhaling shakily. At least we learned your limits, or lack thereof.
Ino pressed her lips together, uncertain whether to scold Naruto or admire him. You're beyond dangerous, she said quietly, eyes flicking to the black lines along his arm. I don't know what's in you, but, she hesitated, then finished, just don't forget we're still allies, yeah.
Naruto's response was a low, sardonic chuckle. As long as you don't get in my way. They parted soon after, the echo of the brief battle lingering in the air. Ino and Tenten exchanged uneasy glances, acknowledging that Naruto's power set him in a realm all his own. Hinata, later that evening. She stood behind a tall tree near a clearing, observing Naruto train alone. He was drenched in sweat, unleashing wave after wave of that red and black chakra. She trembled, but not solely from fear. Something about his unbridled ambition pulled at her. She'd brought a small container of water and some ointment, though she doubted he'd accept it. Step forward, she told herself. But each time she thought to reveal her presence, she froze. The sight of those black markings across his skin unsettled her, and his eyes gleamed with a ruthlessness she didn't fully recognize. The old Naruto she'd admired was in there somewhere, but was this him now? She gathered her courage and stepped out from behind the tree. The swirling chakra around him wavered as he noticed her. For an instant, his expression softened, though it quickly hardened again. Hinata, he said, voice flat. She lifted the small container. I saw you training. Thought you might, need water. She forced the words out, her cheeks burning. He eyed the container, then her. I'm fine. He didn't move to dismiss her, though. Awkward silence. Hinata steadied her trembling hands. You're in the finals. Congratulations. He shrugged. Yeah. Her heart pounded. Despite his cold demeanor, she found herself edging closer. Naruto-kun, she murmured. I know you're different. But I still believe you can protect the people you care about, in your own way. A flicker of something crossed his gaze. Annoyance? Or maybe reluctant gratitude. It vanished in a beat. You shouldn't put me on a pedestal, he said quietly. I don't do this for anyone but myself. She nodded, though a trace of sadness glimmered in her eyes. I understand. Carefully, she set the container of water on a nearby rock. Even if it's just for you, your strength inspires me. He turned away, unsure how to respond. A sliver of warmth or guilt twisted in his chest. It angered him that he felt any guilt at all. Instead of answering, he refocused on his training. Hinata lingered a moment longer, then quietly left. Her footsteps receded into the forest's hush. Orochimaru's lair, hidden cavern. Deep underground, torches sputtered against damp stone walls. Orochimaru stood before a rough-hewn table strewn with forbidden scrolls and diagrams of curses. Kabuto hovered nearby, leafing through medical notes with clinical detachment. The boy interests me more than Sasuke now, Orochimaru murmured, eyes gleaming with obsession. Ryomen Sukuna's reincarnation. He's beyond the 9 tails. If I can dissect that power, perhaps fuse it with my own.
Kabuto adjusted his glasses. You still plan on attending the finals, right? The sand and sound are coordinating for the invasion. Orochimaru's laughter echoed. Of course, I wouldn't miss Naruto Uzumaki's grand performance. When the leaf trembles, we'll see which monster stands atop the rubble. His hands traced a half-seal, serpent slithering across the table in dark anticipation. In the back of his mind, he recalled Naruto's savage strike that nearly tore him to pieces in the forest of death. That raw, untempered might tempted him like nothing else.
Final week before the exams, secret training spot.
Naruto pushed himself further each day, balancing grudging sessions with Jiraiya's summoning training and his own focus on mastering Sukuna's curses. He studied old jutsu scrolls from the Uzumaki clan archives, distant relatives he'd never known, hoping to find sealing techniques he could twist to harness his black aura. Though the scrolls mostly detailed standard fuinjutsu, he gleaned fragments that might help him steady the unstoppable domain rattling inside him. On the 7th day, a strange hush fell in the hidden clearing. Naruto, practicing alone, finally managed to form a partial domain manifestation, a swirling black vacuum-like shell that extended a few feet around him. Leaves disintegrated in the field's radius, and the ground cracked. If he expanded it further, he sensed it could trap opponents within a lethal boundary, but the strain hammered at his body, forcing him to break the technique after only a few seconds. He dropped to one knee, panting. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. A wave of dizziness hit him, the cost of channeling that much cursed pled his eyes. If he could refine it, no one in the finals would stand a chance. Sasuke, night in the Uchiha compound. Shadows danced across the silent corridors of his clan's empty estate. Sasuke stared at his reflection in a cracked mirror. The cursed seal on his neck pulsed faintly. Each time he remembered Naruto's overwhelming might, jealousy and shame crashed over him in equal measure. He's changed, and I'm still lagging behind. Sasuke closed his eyes, recalling the moment Orochimaru bit into his neck. That vile chakra inside him offered power. If Naruto was beyond him, maybe the cursed seal was the only way to catch up, no matter the price. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. No, I'll do this my way. But a nagging voice inside him echoed Orochimaru's tempting promise: seek power, or stay a weakling forever. He trembled, torn by ambition, hatred, and a flicker of loyalty to Team 7 that refused to die. Eve of the final battles, arena grounds. A massive stone stadium stood on the outskirts of Konoha, ringed by high walls. Though the finals were set for the next morning, the stands were already abuzz with workers laying out seats and making last-minute repairs. Genin finalists arrived for registration and final instructions. Naruto passed through the gates, ignoring the curious stares of civilians. The air felt electric, a prelude to chaos. He spotted Gaara perched on a ledge, eyes vacant yet deadly. Temari and Kankuro stood nearby, speaking in hushed tones. Across the courtyard, Neji Hyuga meditated, brows furrowed in cold determination. Shikamaru yawned next to him, but tension lingered behind his lazy expression. In the crowd, Tenten and Ino waved, though their smiles were subdued. Hinata lingered at the edges, quietly rooting for her friends. Further down, Sasuke was nowhere to be seen, rumored to be finishing special training with Kakashi. At the far end of the arena entrance, Jiraiya nodded to Naruto. Tomorrow's the big day. You ready? Naruto's lips curved in a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Always.
You might face Gaara or Neji or even Sasuke, Jiraiya continued. Keep your head clear. Naruto shrugged. If they get in my way, they'll lose.
Behind them, hidden among the shadows, Danzo watched, flanked by two Root Anbu. A faint scowl tugged at his features. With the finals approaching, and Orochimaru in the mix, Naruto had become both an asset and a disaster waiting to happen. Nightfall. Rooftop overlooking Konoha. Naruto stood alone on a high rooftop, the village lights twinkling below like scattered stars. He stared at the horizon. Tomorrow, the entire Leaf, and visitors from rival nations, would witness the Chunin exam finals. Everyone wanted a new champion. Everyone wanted to see feats of valor. Naruto Uzumaki, hero of the Leaf. He snorted at the notion. There would be no heroism here, just the brutal unveiling of Sukuna's reincarnation. If the village accepted him out of fear, so be it. If they cast him out, he'd carve his own path. A swirl of wind rustled his hair. He half expected another late-night visitor, Sakura, or maybe Hinata. But none came. The emptiness suited him better. He closed his eyes, letting the black aura trace across his body. Quiet laughter echoed in his mind. Sukuna's, or his own, or both. Tomorrow, he said aloud, voice echoing across the empty rooftops, we tear this stage apart. Thunder rolled in the distance, as though answering his vow. And in that moment, Naruto felt truly alive, a towering juggernaut poised to shatter anything in his path. Chapter End. Chapter 5. Morning dawned over Konoha's grand stadium, golden light chasing away shadows of the previous night's tensions. From every corner of the village, civilians and shinobi alike flooded the stands, eager to witness the Chunin exam finals. Nobles, feudal lords, and foreign dignitaries crowded prime seats, guarded by Leaf Anbu. Anticipation thrummed in the air, promising high drama and unforeseen danger. Arena floor. Opening ceremony. The finalists stood in formation on the open floor, ringed by the towering walls of the Colosseum. High above, the audience buzzed with chatter. Naruto Uzumaki stood alongside Gaara, Neji Hyuga, Temari, Shikamaru, Kankuro, and a recently returned Sasuke Uchiha. Each wore a steeled expression. Jitters and adrenaline colored the atmosphere, except for Naruto, whose calm smacked of unshakable self-assurance. Lord Hokage, flanked by an imposing figure cloaked in regal robes, revealed as the Kazekage, addressed the crowd. Hiruzen's voice carried across the stands. Welcome. Today, these genin prove their worth. The battles will be single elimination, officiated by proctors. Observe closely, for these young shinobi may shape the future of our world. Naruto barely listened, eyes drifting up to the foreign Kazekage. Something felt off about the man's posture, his aura. A spark of Sukuna's malice stirred in Naruto's gut, sensing roiling intent behind that veiled face. But he shrugged it off, letting his gaze wander to the dais where Ino, Tenten, and Hinata waited, each wearing differing expressions of hope, worry, and fascination. He gave them an almost imperceptible nod. They answered with faint smiles or tense waves. First match. Neji vs. Naruto. The random matchups flashed on a board overhead. Gasps swept the stadium as Neji Hyuga and Naruto Uzumaki were called to the arena floor. Neji stepped forward, Byakugan veins pulsing around his eyes. Sakura and Tenten exchanged worried looks from the stands. Sasuke crossed his arms, scanning Naruto's face for a reaction. Naruto walked to the center, rolling his shoulders. He remembered how Neji had humiliated Hinata in the preliminaries. A flicker of Sukuna's savage satisfaction whispered through his mind. This was an opponent he wouldn't mind breaking.
The proctor, a silver-haired Chunin, raised his hand. Begin.
Neji attacked first, feet sliding into a perfect gentle fist stance. He closed in with swift palm strikes aimed at Naruto's chakra points. But Naruto wove around them, the black lines flickering just beneath his skin. Every time Neji's palm grazed him, Naruto twisted free before the Hyuga's chakra could seal anything. You can't touch me, Naruto said softly, voice brimming with self-assurance.
Neji's eyes narrowed. Fate decrees you'll lose. You're arrogant.
Naruto cut him off by swinging a backhand that Neji barely parried. The shockwave rattled the arena floor. Neji flipped backward, breath short. For a moment, doubt flashed in his pale eyes. He formed the 8 trigram stance, swirling chakra around him in a protective dome. You can't break this defense. Naruto smirked. Wanna bet? He exhaled, letting Sukuna's cursed energy coil through his limbs. The air around him darkened, like a distortion. He lunged, driving a fist into Neji's spinning dome of chakra. Sparks flew as the barrier collided with Naruto's cursed aura. The entire stadium hushed, expecting Naruto's blow to be repelled. Instead, the barrier cracked with an audible snap. Neji was thrown back, nearly colliding with the wall. A startled cry rose from the crowd. Neji stood, blood trickling from his lip. He tried to speak, but Naruto was on him instantly, delivering a punishing uppercut to the chest. The Hyuga coughed, dropping to one knee. Naruto seized him by the collar, lifting him effortlessly. You talk about fate, Naruto said, voice low. Here's your fate. Weak or strong, it doesn't matter to me. I crush anyone in my path. Neji mustered a last-ditch blow, jabbing Naruto's shoulder. It barely registered. Naruto flung Neji to the ground, chakra flaring around his hand as if ready to deliver a lethal strike. The proctor rushed in, alarmed. Stop, he's down. Neji coughed, unable to stand. The proctor declared, winner, Naruto Uzumaki. A rumble of astonishment swept the crowd. Hinata watched with a pained expression. She was relieved Neji survived, but seeing him sewed rattled her. Tenten exhaled in dismay, while Ino bit her lip, equally awed and uneasy. Up in the cage box, Hiruzen's face was grim, and the cage's face was unreadable behind the veil.
Naruto strode from the arena without so much as a backward glance, ignoring the medics who rushed to help Neji. He didn't care about the Hyuga's condition. He was hungry for a greater challenge, someone who could push him further. Other fights continued. Temari's wind scythes decimated Tenten's teammate Shikamaru, forcing him to surrender in typical exasperated fashion.
Kankuro outsmarted his opponent with cunning puppet traps. Gaara crushed Rock Lee with terrifying sand powers, though something about Gaara's expression hinted at dissatisfaction, as if longing for bigger prey. Sasuke faced off against a sound nin, tapping into the cursed seal's edge but holding back enough to secure victory without losing himself.
Between matches, a restless hush settled. Sensing Orochimaru's presence somewhere, Naruto paced the corridors beneath the stands, fists clenched. He felt like a wolf itching to hunt, locked behind a flimsy gate.
The anticipated match, Naruto vs. Gaara. A hush fell over the stadium as the board announced, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Gaara of the Sand. This was the clash the crowd had whispered about, two monstrous forces rumored to hold tailed beasts or worse within them. The audience leaned forward, hearts pounding.
Gaara descended into the arena, eyes lifeless yet brimming with lethal promise. Sand swirled around him. Naruto dropped to the ground from the stands, landing in a crouch. A savage grin flickered across his face.
The proctor didn't even get to say, begin, before Gaara's sand lashed out. Naruto dodged, letting Sukuna's dark power flare in response. Columns of swirling sand crashed into black chakra barriers, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The crowd gasped, awed by the clash of energies. From the cage box, the cage, Orochimaru in disguise, leaned forward. Hiruzen didn't notice his subtle smirk. Orochimaru's plan to use Gaara as the catalyst for the invasion was already in motion. On the battlefield, Gaara howled, sand coalescing into the shape of a monstrous arm. Naruto answered by summoning a partial domain, an invisible bubble of cursed space around him. Gaara's sand, upon entering that zone, withered and cracked, as though afflicted by rotting energy. Gaara's eyes widened in furious surprise. Naruto lunged, his fist colliding with Gaara's sand armor. A spiderweb of cracks formed, and Gaara recoiled in pain. Blood spattered across the sand. For a moment, Gaara glared at his hand, trembling. My blood, he whispered, voice raw with shock. Naruto didn't relent. He hammered another blow. The arena floor shook, entire slabs of stone upending. Gaara's composure cracked further. A swirl of demonic chakra leaked out, forming a half-manifestation of Shukaku the One-Tail. An inhuman shriek tore from Gaara's throat as the beast's influence took hold, giant raccoon-like features emerging from swirling sand.
This is who you are, Naruto said coldly, letting cursed aura bristle along his arms. A half-baked monster.
Gaara screeched and unleashed a tidal wave of sand. Naruto countered with a domain expansion. Though incomplete, it was enough to distort reality in a small radius. The center of the arena warped as black lines etched themselves into the ground. Spectators cried out, sensing the oppressive, suffocating energy. Gaara's monstrous appendage crashed against Naruto's domain barrier, fracturing but not penetrating. Naruto soared forward, pushing through the quicksand. With monstrous strength, he drove a palm against Gaara's chest. The sand beast shrieked, and Gaara himself was flung backward into the arena wall, leaving a crater of shattered stone. Just then, a piercing whistle sounded. In the stands, Sound Nin and Sand Nin erupted with hidden weapons and illusions. The invasion had begun. Bombs detonated around the perimeter. Dozens of Leaf Shinobi scrambled to defend the village. Screams and panicked shouts filled the air. Chaos of the invasion. At the highest vantage point, Orochimaru cast off the Cage disguise. He seized Hiruzen in a swirl of summoned barriers, initiating their fated duel. Meanwhile, Suna and Odo forces launched an assault within the stadium, unleashing giant snakes that crashed through the walls. Civilians fled in terror. Leaf Shinobi fought back valiantly. Naruto found himself in the middle of swirling chaos. Gaara, half-conscious, continued to mutate under Shukaku's influence. He stumbled from the arena, compelled to transform fully. Sasuke dashed after Gaara, drawn by the rivalry and by the lure of proving himself. Naruto, scowling, pursued as well. There was no way he'd let Sasuke steal this showdown. As Naruto raced through the crumbling stadium corridors, he passed Ino and Tenten locked in battle against invading Sound Nin. Hinata was off to the side, tending to an injured Genin. When they spotted him, relief lit their faces.
Go! Tenten urged, spinning her twin blades to fend off attackers. We've got this. Ino winked, unleashing a mind transfer on a hapless Sound Nin. Kick some butt, Naruto. Naruto gave them a brisk nod. A swirl of cursed chakra flared around him in an intimidating aura, scattering lesser enemies who dared to block his path. Forest outside the stadium. Gaara's full release in the dense forest beyond the arena. Trees trembled under the weight of a colossal Shukaku emerging from swirling sand. Sasuke, panting, tried to muster a Chidori, but the cursed seal on his neck flared, sapping his stamina. He staggered. Gaara roared, half lost in the tailed beast's mania. Naruto arrived, glaring up at the monstrous Shukaku. A primal surge of excitement coursed through him. Finally, something that might push me. He glanced at Sasuke, who grimaced in pain. Sasuke spat bitterly, "Don't get in my." Naruto vanished in a burst of speed, ignoring the complaint. He soared up the trunk of a massive tree, black aura crackling around his arm. Shukaku bellowed, swiping a gargantuan claw. Naruto leapt onto the beast's shoulder, slamming a cursed punch that tore away chunks of sand. Shukaku's body shrieked but began regenerating almost instantly. Laughing, half wild, Naruto shaped a partial domain expansion directly on the beast's surface. Churning black lines spidered across Shukaku's torso, disintegrating the sand where they spread. Gaara screeched from within, struggling to maintain control. The beast stumbled, entire sections of sand collapsing into vile dust. However, the feedback hammered Naruto's own chakra pathways. Blood dripped from his nose, his body protesting the strain of channeling such corrupt power. But he refused to yield. Summoning the last piece of Jiraiya's training, he briefly tapped into the Nine Tails reserves as well, fusing that fiery chakra with Sukuna's domain. A horrifying synergy poured forth, twisting the domain into a savage maelstrom. Shukaku howled as the domain tore into its sand flesh. With a mighty roar, the beast collapsed in on itself. In a final surge of panic, Gaara tried to hold Shukaku's form together, but Naruto struck again, this time aiming at the ephemeral link binding Gaara to the transformation. The blow reverberated through Gaara's mind, snapping him from Shukaku's control. The giant beast form disintegrated into swirling sand, revealing Gaara's battered body. Naruto landed on a broken tree trunk, chest heaving, cursed lines flaring across his arms and torso. For a moment, he gazed down at Gaara, who lay beaten and bleeding. Gaara looked up, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and an odd, childlike vulnerability. "Why do you fight?" Gaara rasped, barely audible. "Is it for someone?"
Naruto exhaled, letting the black aura recede slightly. He thought of the leaf, the classmates, the powerful drive that once fueled him to be acknowledged. But Sukuna's voice hissed in his mind, more protecting others. At length, Naruto answered in a quiet, bitter tone, "I fight for myself. That's all." Gaara's eyes drifted shut, consciousness fading. Naruto turned away, scanning for signs of Sasuke. The Uchiha had collapsed nearby, cursed seal smoldering across his neck. Naruto snorted, half contemptuous, half relieved the fool was alive. Returned to the stadium, Orochimaru's last stand. Carrying Sasuke by the arm, Naruto raced back to the stadium, where the leaf struggled against giant serpents and rampaging Sound Nin. Above the battlefield, Orochimaru battled Hiruzen inside a swirling barrier. Explosions lit the sky. The Sannin had summoned the undead forms of the first and second Hokage, forcing Hiruzen into a desperate fight. As Naruto arrived at the stadium's edge, Danzo appeared from the shadows, flanked by root operatives. For a moment, Naruto tensed, suspecting an attack. But Danzo simply regarded him coldly, evaluating. "Uzumaki," Danzo said, "the village is on the brink. Help subdue Orochimaru, and your role in the Leaf's future can be negotiated." Naruto bared his teeth in a mocking grin. "Negotiate? With you?" The cursed lines flickered. He could sense Danzo's intentions. Never direct, always manipulative. Before Danzo could reply, a thundering crash drew their attention. Orochimaru's barrier shattered. Hiruzen, grievously wounded, had sacrificed himself to seal Orochimaru's arms, using the Reaper Death Seal. Staggering and cursing, Orochimaru leapt away with a swirl of serpents, retreating while the Leaf Shinobi secured the area. The giant snakes conjured by Orochimaru vanished in a final plume of smoke. Sound forces, leaderless, began to withdraw. Atop the broken stadium walls, Naruto narrowed his eyes, watching Orochimaru vanish into the distance. He got away. A wave of resentment coursed through him. He'd hoped for a decisive confrontation, but the third Hokage had paid the price instead. Aftermath in the ruined stadium. The invasion ended abruptly with the Sound's retreat. Fires smoldered across collapsed sections of the village. Leaf Shinobi worked tirelessly to evacuate the injured and douse flames. Medics rushed to and fro, triaging the wounded. In the stadium's battered corridors, Tenten and Ino treated minor injuries while calling out for survivors. Hinata assisted, using her Byakugan to spot hidden casualties. Naruto, feeling the aftershocks of using his cursed domain, stumbled slightly. Hinata noticed and hurried over, concern etched on her face.
"Naruto-kun, you're hurt," she said, voice quavering. He brushed her aside. "I'm fine," he insisted, ignoring the burning ache in his muscles. Tenten approached, looking both relieved and exasperated. "You sure about that? You look like you fought an entire army." He huffed, refusing help, but Ino added, "Just let us patch you up, you idiot." Her teasing tone held genuine worry. Perhaps due to fatigue, or the glimmer of warmth in their faces, he finally allowed them to examine him. Tenten bound his injuries with expert skill. Ino gently tested his reflexes, ensuring no severe nerve damage. Hinata hovered, offering a canteen of water. Each moment felt surreal, as if the warlike aura around him momentarily lifted while these kunoichi fussed over him. When they finished, he stood, rolling his shoulders. "Thanks," he muttered, though his pride gnawed at him for looking weak. Still, the girl's unwavering concern tempered his bitterness. A flicker of something close to camaraderie glowed between them. Farewell to the third Hokage. The day ended with a solemn gathering at the village's central plaza. Hiruzen Sarutobi's body, draped in ceremonial cloth, was borne by elite shinobi. A hush claimed the crowd as they paid final respects. Cheers streamed down the faces of many Leaf citizens. He had been a father figure to countless. Naruto stood on the outskirts, face unreadable. He recalled Hiruzen's earnest plea, "If something within you threatens the balance, come to me." Now the Hokage was gone, leaving the village reeling. Naruto felt neither grief nor triumph. Only a hollow pang, as if one of the last steady figures in his life had vanished. Nearby, Sasuke gazed at the funeral pyre with quiet rage, overshadowed by his own frustrations. Sakura tried to console him, to no avail. Tenten, Ino, and Hinata clustered together, each wearing subdued expressions. Many eyes drifted to Naruto, uncertain what role he would play in the village's future now that the third was gone. Danzo observed from a distance, silent and calculating. Days later, epilogue. A slow, painstaking rebuilding process began in Konoha. The aftermath of Orochimaru's invasion left scars across the rooftops, the hearts of the people, and the minds of the shinobi. Funeral rites honored the dead. The question of succession for the Hokage loomed. Rumors circulated that Jiraiya had been asked to step up, or that he might find another candidate, Tsunade, the Slug Princess. For Naruto, the official note came that, despite the chaos, he and several others were recognized for valor, though it was a twisted sort of valor in his case. The council debated awarding him the rank of Chunin but hesitated due to his ominous power. In the end, Shikamaru was the only one formally promoted. Many recognized that Naruto's potential was no mere rank-and-file case but something else entirely.
None of that concerned Naruto much. Instead, he found himself drifting to the training grounds again, urged by Sukuna's restless voice. Some nights, he'd encounter Tenten or Ino or Hinata, each drawn to him for their own reasons, fascination, gratitude, or maybe an inexplicable bond. He'd allow them near, even letting them spar or talk, though he remained guarded. A nascent, unconventional harem dynamic sprouted, tethered by a shared awe of his power and an undercurrent of genuine, if uneasy, affection. Sasuke, meanwhile, brooded on the edge of defection, haunted by Orochimaru's brand. Sakura struggled to hold Team 7 together. Kakashi watched, worried, but powerless to mend the rift entirely. Jiraiya tried reaching out to Naruto, but the boy kept the Sannin at arm's length, still resentful of any attempts to leash his potential.
Out in the ruined forest near the battered stadium, Naruto stood on a branch, gazing over the twilit horizon.
Though the village carried on behind him, he felt like an entity set apart, neither hero nor complete villain, moving in lockstep with the cursed king dwelling inside him. He inhaled the night air, tasting both the bitterness of mortality and the promise of absolute power. If the village accepted him, if they feared him, or if they spurned him, none of it mattered. He would keep walking his path, one built on conquest and the primal satisfaction of breaking all who stood before him. In the distance, the moon glowed pale and solitary, mirroring his own state. He let the memory of Gaara's defeat swirl in his mind, savoring how unstoppable he'd felt. But a hungry voice inside him hissed that there were stronger foes out there, bigger battles to be waged. Orochimaru, the Akatsuki, unknown threats lurking on distant horizons, good. Let them come. He closed his eyes, his lips twisting into a slight smile. Behind him, Tenten and Ino caught sight of that silhouette against the moonlit sky, uncertain what thoughts ran through his head. Hinata watched from farther away, heart pounding with an odd mixture of concern and devotion. They were all tethered to him, one way or another. Naruto opened his eyes, Sukuna's power rippling beneath his skin. He no longer cared for the village's small-minded judgments. He was Naruto Uzumaki, but he was also Ryomen Sukuna's reincarnation, standing at the cusp of an age bathed in turmoil. The world would soon learn. No matter how deep the darkness, no matter how grim the curses, he would stand above it all, as unstoppable and merciless as the legendary king of curses. And so the winds of fate shifted around Konoha, whispering of the day Naruto's truled for all to see and bow before. Chapter end. To be continued.